Good morning, everyone. I will be calling the meeting of the EBID Irrigation District Board of Directors. If we would, please, don't call it, please.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for these gentlemen that showed up here today, Lord. We always ask for your guidance, Lord. We ask for your understanding and wisdom to guide these people down the road, Lord, that would be exactly your will. We thank you for the moisture we're getting on our watershed. We ask you to bless us with more water, Lord. And we ask to bless these men and all that they do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Tracy, would you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible.
Thank you all very much. We'll start with an introduction of guests. We'll start with the front row.
Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, my name is John Longworth, Senior Advisor to the State Engineer and Senior State Stream Commission Director, and I'm here to give a presentation on the groundwater conservation program that the state is starting to file out. Thank you.
Good morning, Ryan Brownell, Office of the State Engineer and New York State Commission.
That's out for the commission. Gary Kikos, Sierra Club.
Alan Jackson, I'm visiting here from the Groundwater. Adam Young, also from Bingham Groundwater District.
Heather Rice.
Dylan Anderson, also from
Sharon Byron, Davies.
Steve Fernandez, Carl Vetter, Anthony Cullen, the next coach. Max Ankles, MNDA.
Taylor, your reclamation.
Good morning, all, and welcome to this meeting of the EBID Irrigation District Board of Directors. Do you have anyone introduced online, ma'am?
Can you unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please? Okay, I have legal counsel Selena, Madi Hernandez, J.R. Hennessy, Liz, and J.A. Hogan online, sir.
Thank you very much. That brings us to our approval of minutes. We have the minutes from our regular scheduled board meeting of August 2nd. Are there any changes, corrections, additions to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes as presented. I have a motion from Mr. Frank Saltek, seconded by Mr. James Saltek to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? To the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. The minutes of August 2nd are approved. We have the special board meeting of August 16th. Minutes also in your board packet. Any corrections or additions, please? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion from Ms. Tracy Esslinger, seconded by Mr. Sal Nunez, to approve the minutes of August 16th. All those in favor, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, close. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? To the chair, the ayes have it, the motion carries. It brings us to the calendar of events. Mr. Esslinger.
This is on page 11. Was it? The rest of September, point is quiet as far as conferences and meetings outside the district. We will be having some budget committee meetings going forth between now and the next board meeting to get approval of our 2024 budget. And so we'll be sending in flyers and notice to the budget committee on that. In October, it's quite busy at the beginning of the month. There's the first inaugural water users, Rio Grande Water Users Association meet conference in Saturday, and as well as on that Thursday, then on the fifth and the sixth, there's also the New Mexico Watershed and Dam Owner conference in Albuquerque. So we'll have staff and board hopefully going to both of those. Please make sure that Naomi knows who wants to attend this inaugural meeting on the Rio Grande. Looks like we've got some great speakers and keynote speakers coming from federal government as well as congressional speakers. One of them is our congressional Melanie Sanford, who is the board meeting is regularly scheduled for Wednesday, 7th of October, and
Thank you very much, Mr. Esslinger. With regard to the conference first week in October, do you have the list of board members attending?
That will be Mr. President, I have Greg, Paul, and Tracy.
Thank you very much. Are there any other board members that wish to attend or not? The representative is small yet, so we will come back to him on the agenda. So that brings us to Mr. Longman. Mr. Longman, come to the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well worked out. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, my name is John Longworth, and as I indicated, I'm the senior advisor for the state engineer and the ISC director. State engineers charged me with working on projects in the Lower Rio Grande, and one of the first ones that he's asked me to work on is this leasing program that we call the Groundwater Conservation Program. Groundwater Conservation Program will run from a period start January 1, 2024 and go through 12/31/2025. So it's a 2-year program, and I'll get a little bit more into it as we go along. To talk a little bit about the appropriation for the program, we have 2 basic appropriations. We have a capital outlay appropriation, which is $6 million over 5 years. So that's a source of money for this program if necessary. And we also have had approximately a $30 million general appropriation from the legislature this past session. It was 35 total, but it touched a couple different things, including the Colorado River and some money for litigation for the Attorney General's office. So about 30 there, and that's helping us run the program and bringing on contractors to be able to do some of the background work, to be able to kind of do what we've done in the past and have the tools available for public to be able to file their applications. Again, as I indicated, the grants are for calendar years 24-25. And as I move forward, I'll talk a little purpose slide, but I'll talk about the application schedule and the eligibility criteria. Mr. Chairman, can everybody hear me?
Hear you fine, Mr. Longman.
Okay, great. So the purpose of this program is to continue groundwater conservation actions that will ensure that New Mexico has a sustainable groundwater supply, not just now, but also for future generations in New Mexico. And I'll show a little history there. Our principal goal here is to think about how can we continue to manage groundwater in such a way that we can stop essentially we're in a mining situation, and try to turn that corner and start kind of bringing back to what way it was in the past, where it was a drought reserve for those periods of time that we needed that, but also have it to be able to bounce back so that we would have it for future drought. We'll be offering grant opportunities to compensate irrigators for temporarily conserving irrigating and previous irrigated lands. So in other words, we're looking at idling some fields. Again, it's a willing situation. And this is a really important point that I kind of want to make clear is this is a bridge to a longer term solution. In conversations with the IOC director, Hanny Risley White, and the state engineer, they're looking forward to having a broader community conversation about how we're going to manage consumption and depletion management going forward into the future. I don't really want to, I mean, I'm not here to talk about 141, but obviously that exists and that's something that is in the background. But really, the state engineer wants to have this longer term discussion with the community. One of the things we want to be careful about is, like, right now we're talking about the groundwater conservation program, this bridging effort. We talked about having a broader discussion with the community at this point, but we felt that would be inappropriate in terms of like clouding the message. So once we get through this, at that point, I suspect the state engineer is going to ask me to start doing some work on pulling that together. We're going to need to, we have some resources that we need to bring together, such as outreach folks, and also just contact content creators and just start coming up with a plan as to how we start those community conversations. I know the state engineer is committed to this. This is something that he's worked on in similar situation, but in a similar context with regards to some policy issues this last legislative session. So that's kind of what he's thinking about. And so we're going to be planning that going forward. And that's coming to traction. So I bring up the aquifer condition. I talk about sustainability or being able to bounce back, if you will. And, you know, I'm going to go through stuff that I think people in this room know better than I. But this is how, in general, I think most of the experts agree to some degree, is that if we start out here looking out at the late 40s, we had, you know, the aquifer was responding as you expect. Then, of course, in the drought in the 50s, we started drilling a lot of groundwater wells. And so the aquifer was hit pretty good. It's estimated about 225,000 acre feet. Was lost in storage. So this is not a well. This is like looking more at the aquifer itself. So we're looking at storage data. But then we see this rebound more or less back to the 1940 levels. And again, in the 60s, we see that next blip, I think it was mid 60s. Again, we see this nice kind of bounce back. And then we had a couple little ones here going through the 70s. And then we hit the early 80s, and we were really blessed with having just an abundance of supply. And so the groundwater wasn't hit at all. And then we get to the beginning of the drought. Some say it started in the mid 90s. Some say, I don't know. Whenever it started, it certainly really started taking effect in and around the beginning of the 2000s. And we see this drop. Very similar to this drop. Very similar to this drop, etc. So that in and of itself, okay. But the thing we didn't see is the same quick, strong rebound. We can see that because this line is not as steep as that line, or that line. And that definitely caused everybody, I'm sure the community here was concerned about that. And certainly from the state perspective, we're a little concerned about that looking forward. And then we really got slobbering off it. Very technical. In and around the mid, about what 2012, I think, is about when it kind of really started hitting home. And we lost 250,000 acre feet out of storage. Dr. Fox also did an analysis starting about that time frame, and you'll notice he has a very similar pattern. Our modeling shows that it kind of stuck down here. Dr. Fox shows it coming back up. His data set goes out a little further, and what's troubling in my mind is that we see, again, we bounce back down. And so this goes through, I believe, 2022. So it's relatively recent. So February 2022, so about a year and a half old. This is the challenge, and this is why I'm here, is how do we get back to this kind of situation, heck, even this kind of situation, given what I'm describing as a mind aquifer. In the long, if this trend continues in the long term, At some point, you're gonna run into salts, at some point, wells are gonna run dry. Going into the deep aquifer has its own perils. So this is my figure to sort of describe what the sustainability issue is from my perspective. All right, moving on to the program. So we're going to be accepting grant applications for this program. Again, this is a willing participant program, and the application period will begin September 25th, which is I think in a week and a half or so, and we'll go through October 16th. So we have a dedicated period to help us get applications in for those who want to apply. We need to get that, kind of that information in so we can marshal our resources to be able to review those applications. The enrollment price, acreage enrolled in the program will be paid $1,500 per acre for the 24-month grant agreement. It breaks down to $750 per acre per year. It's a 2-year agreement. But when we did the first round of the conservation program, we call it the pilot program, we had a tiered structure. The community could come in at a different level. I think we had to start at 400 and went as high as 800. And from that, we were able to get a small data set that showed us that I want to say it was like 650-ish was sort of like the average price. But we did see that there was 2 different sort of levels, around 600, I believe, and then about 800, that there was really a number of different entities. One, that's kind of where they came in. The executive team from the State Engineer's Office and the Interstate Stream Commission at that time looked at that number. And as we talked it out, we said 750 was a reasonable number. It's a little bit higher than the average, but given all the conditions and certainly given understanding that there was, a number of entities, let me say that, coming in at the 800 level, the executive decision was made to go to 750. So that's where we come up with the $1,500 per acre for the 24-month grant agreement. Okay, I'm going to go through the eligibility requirements. So for those who are familiar with the program, a lot of these are not new. There's a couple tweaks here and there. So irrigated acreage in simplest sense is a parcel of at least 10 acres in size. It's previously been irrigated. I'll get to that in a second. Then if it's a partial parcel, can be accepted provided that the 10-acre minimum groundwater irrigated acreage requirement is met. So what do I mean by that? If the county parcel is 100 acres and somebody wants to put in 30 acres, so if it's out of that parcel, a partial parcel is acceptable. And we'll talk about the map related to that in a moment. Then we've run into this situation a fair amount where you have multiple parcels are allowed so long as that it's a contiguous groundwater irrigated acreage and meets the 10-acre minimum requirement. So we have a 10-acre farm and it's 2 acres in one county parcel, 2 acres in another county parcel, and 6 acres in another county parcel. That's acceptable. If we're talking about 2 acres here, 2 acres here, and 2 acres or 6 acres over there, that's not acceptable. And the reason why is we just don't have the resources to monitor those kinds of small acreages all over the valley. So we really want to keep this in a minimum of 10-acre size. That gets us the ability to have some administrative capabilities to again, ensure that participants are abiding by the grant agreement. I want to say something, I should have said this more at my listening sessions. We did not have a single grantee over the past 2 cycles of pilot program violate any of the conditions, not one. We have one that was a mix up in like where they wanted it. We corrected that right away. But other than that, we didn't have a single participant violate any of the conditions. And I think that's a tribute to the community that was involved. So that little mix-up, I said, it was a very minor one, like a couple acres. And what the challenge was is we were not looking at the same map. The gentleman who was farming that acreage had one map, and we had another map. And then, like when we went out there, we're like, "Well, our map doesn't match your map," and so we made adjustments, so it worked out okay. But we need a map, and that's going to be helpful to communicate between the participant and the state to know what area we would be looking for. We will have available one of our experts, Dave Romero, who has built this GIS database. For those of you who are not aware of that, we used this past couple of rounds in the pilot program where one can go online and find your parcel, get all the associated information. And then he's available to assist anybody who needs to then, because it has a map drawing function. It's not the exact map, but at least we're all on the same page. As we go through the review process, ultimately water rights will produce a map, and that map will become part of the contract. And at that point, we want to make sure we're in connection with the producer or the participant, excuse me, so that we all know we're talking about the same parcel. And we do not have that confusion again. And that's also going to assist our team that goes out and does verification to know exactly where they need to go. So that's a little bit of a new requirement. I mean, there's always been the necessity of a map. It's just now we're asking for it up front. Continuing on to eligibility criteria, groundwater irrigated parcels are eligible for participation in the program if this is a little bit of a new one from the past. The acreage has been irrigated with groundwater only, or a combination of groundwater and surface water for a minimum of 4 years between 2016 and 2022. In the past, we've had it in 5-year increments and 4 years out of that 5 years. But now that we've had some participants who have indicated they're going to continue with the program, that starts breaking down a little bit. So what we want to do is have, if they've qualified in the past, for this particular one, they're qualified. We think those applications are going to be relatively easy to administer. But we wanted to be careful not to just sort of have this moving average. We just wanted to open it up so that we just have this period from 16 to 22. Our folks who are running the database basically use an NDVI, which is a measure of greenness as evidence of irrigation. We also allow for FSA insurance and other kind of cropping records in the event that the NDVI doesn't pick up irrigation. We just need to show that we have, that the state's looking at reducing irrigation in that particular plot. The acreage must be located in Doña Ana County or Sierra counties wholly within the state of New Mexico. Why do we have this here? It seems kind of obvious. I think many of you here, if not most of you, know that we have splits along the state line, where partial of property is in Texas and partial of property is in New Mexico. We've seen different applications come in where they want to forego diversions in Texas. Well, we don't have any control over that. Or they want to forego irrigation from wells in New Mexico. Again, the way that is administered by the state engineer is that they are allowed to use right of capture if their farms split. So then again, we still have that challenge of like, how do we monitor whether or not you're shutting down irrigated acreage? So this is where the wholly within the state of New Mexico comes from. We're looking for complete properties within the state of New Mexico. Moving on, the groundwater irrigated parcels are eligible for participation in the program if, another eligibility criteria, the water rights associated with the acreage is in good standing with the New Mexico Office of State Engineer Water Rights Division, with the state engineer, put simply, and at a minimum. Now, these are two new considerations. And I want to make it clear on this one, and also with the Texas one, these are outliers. These are not things that we see every day. We run across this, and so we have to put it into our eligibility criteria in case we come across it again. The groundwater rights associated with the acre must have a valid and functioning point or points of diversion. Again, an outlier, we had a situation where, I don't remember, it was like 40 acres, but they're irrigating with a neighbor's well. And the actual well associated with that property was non-functional, matter of fact, didn't exist. So that's an area where the commission had concern. We want a point of diversion that's active with the water right at acreage. The second one is points of diversion associated with the groundwater righted acreage must have a functioning accessible well meter. This goes back to whether or not the water right is in good standing. I'm sure everyone in this room understands that there's a requirement now that everybody has a functioning well meter associated with a point of diversion, and that will be one of the criteria that we will be looking at to make sure the water right is in good standing. With regards to legal, as many of you may know, I am not an attorney, so this is like a word that scares me, but generally speaking, what we mean here is we're looking for as much information up front with the application that we can get. On our website, there's a number of different entities that are available to participate. In other words, all the entities that can be, registered under the Secretary of State. And each one has a slightly different kind of requirement. Some are time sensitive. In other words, there might be a board or governing body that has to authorize somebody to be able to sign the contract and be able to receive payment. Sometimes those are for short periods of time. We may need to update that. But like to start at the simplest point, and I made this story, I think, at all of the listening sessions we had this past week. The gentleman with the safe, and as my staff has told me, as sincere as he could get, he's like, so my grandfather put it in the safe many years ago. We have no idea what the combination is. That's where the deed is. And so, like, okay, well, safe cracker. 2 safe crackers later, the deed's still in the safe. And I certainly appreciate we can get the deed ultimately from the county, but the point I'm making here is now's the time, if people are interested, to get your paperwork together. Because the earlier and then the more complete that can come in with the application, the quicker it's going to be for us to process that application. So I just use that as an example of, it was a good intention. We ultimately were able to solve the problem, but he didn't think through the safe issue. Anyway, the last one here is other due diligence contingencies as determined by the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission are satisfied. This is the outlier ones. These are the situations we don't know and will come up. And so commission has to, retain that. But I want to make it clear, the commission is not sitting here looking like, oh, how can we turn down applications? The commission is committed to making this program work. It has been committed. These are just for these isolated, outside of the norm kind of conditions. And if the commission is not satisfied, those might be applications that we cannot accept. Sure.
Let me ask, put that a little on the point version.
Mm-hmm.
A little confused in that. If they're in good standing with the state engineer's office, that's fine. I just asked less than that. You're in good standing with the state engineer's office, and you irrigated. Somehow in there's got to be implied. You must have had a valid one version. Can't have both of those. How is it that you would not have a valid one version in good standing?
So we would view that as you're not in good standing. So we had a situation where the irrigated acreage is here. We don't know where that water was coming from. I mean, we had a pretty good idea, but there was no point of diversion associated with that property that we could find. As a matter of fact, once we did some investigation on the property, there had been a well at a certain point that essentially, as I understood it, was either buried and had not been used in a very long time or was capped.
So without getting into specific examples, the state engineer makes a determination that they think you have been diverted that would be good standing and would not be eligible.
That would be correct. If you were doing something that was impermissible, you would not be in
If
good.
somehow it's permissible, you must have a valid one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, certainly. I'm going to look back to my colleague, Mr. Serrano.
Thank you.
Topics under consideration. We're working with NMDA and NMSU on soil health, their soil health program. We're starting our 3rd experimental plot. We've looked at 4 plots on different kinds of ground treatments relative to a just fallow field, and have found some success with how to maintain that soil health and maintain the topsoil. We looked at 3 more that had, let's see, it was oats, canola, and peas. So more of a permanent kind of thing. And so trying to figure out how does that work? And some of this work is in the beginning because they're looking at carbon sequestration from that cover crop. How does that improve the soil health? So that's gonna take a few years to finally come up with like best management practices. But we can already see that certain kinds of tillage practices do help keep the soil in place. And some of the anecdotal evidence we've heard is that does work. So this is with the Healthy Soils Program. And one of the things that I want to bring up, and I really appreciate the board's attention on this one. I would say the number one issue we heard in our listening sessions this past, it was like Friday and Saturday. We need to be able to irrigate cover crops. We have not been able to have that availability up to this point, and we're in a pilot program. And so I've brought this up with my management, and we're starting to think through how that might be able to be worked through. And I've spoken to some of the staff here about, is there a way we can coordinate so that if there's irrigation water available or if there's storm water available to put out in that cover crop, that we can keep that cover crop, at least a little, at least green it up so that it doesn't just die and blow away. That's something that we would have to work with you guys on for sure. But it's something we're looking into, and it was, again, I'm gonna say it's the number one issue from my perspective that came from every listening session. We had listening sessions in Anthony, we had listening sessions in Hatch, and we had listening sessions in Las Cruces. So everyone, that issue came up, and so it's something that certainly we need to think through, because we've been using the fallowing as a way to measure compliance with the agreement. And so if we're going to start putting water out on these fields to green up a cover crop, we want to make sure that it's in compliance with our agreement. One of the things that we've been talking about, but certainly not at a point to say this is ready, is to have a section, an amendment B, I think we're calling it, where a participant could put forth a plan as to how they may do that, and then the commission can accept that, and it would become part of the grant. So that's kind of, the lawyers over here. Yeah, the lawyers over here. I'm just kidding, Sam. Kind of thinking through what the legal implications are, and we're working with NMDA and myself, and hopefully moving forward, working with this, with EBID on how that might work. Because you guys operate a system, you guys are the experts at that. We don't want to propose something that just doesn't work. So I just wanted to bring that up. There was a number of different issues that came up, but certainly that was a big one that came up. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's my presentation. And
thank you. Excellent presentation, Mr. Longman. I understand the program much better now. Are there any questions from the board of directors? Longman. I have.
As far as regulating regulations.
so at this point in time, there is no requirement in the contract to have a cover crop. We felt that when we put the pilot program together, that seemed onerous. Because obviously you're looking at to lay out fields. So we've seen, and Mr. Serrano's well aware of some folks just skin the soil every once in a while. Some folks have let it go. We heard comments, particularly in the Hatch area, where people were concerned that they're starting to see salt cedar pop up, and like, what do we do? How to maintain the ditches. So from these listening sessions we had in the community, we're really starting to hear back some of like on the ground impacts from the last few years. And so that's why the idea of cover cropping is really kind of rising to the top, at least in my mind. That's just something we have to solve.
Our area is weeds as tall as this river. I know it's in the river and ditches and canals. It's just that area that involves that property.
John, there's a big difference between a cover crop and I don't know how y'all need to fix that, but you can't have those posters with government. They're 20 foot tall. Everywhere they go across your property, you can see the seed line. And those guys that have that that's upwind, like old Dwayne's talking about, and they come in, they'll cost that person an onions and chili tons of money to put it up. So I have an issue with that, and I understand the cover crop. You might want to identify the difference between the cover crop. So there's a big difference.
Thank you, Mr. Mrs. Salt.
One of to the board members' concerns, one of the things that we've been discussing is how to support a cover crop while also ensuring we get the depletion reduction we're looking for. And you'll recall that EBID's policy requires that you maintain the ground so that it doesn't include additional benefit on our system maintenance. For example, when weeds show up in our system because they're not actively farming. Like John said, that was something that came up continuously last week during those listening sessions, and the state engineer's office has already reached out to me about how we will continue that discussion with EBID and the state engineer to figure out how we meld essentially our policies to make sure our policy of you have to maintain the ground is consistent with theirs and how they're running the program, so that we don't see those adverse effects, but we do still get the depletion reduction. But that's what John's referring to. He says we have to have some more conversation. That's one of those big ones that's still out there.
Thank you, Mrs. Salt.
Yes, Commissioner Lack, we don't think weeds are a cover crop. One of the things that, out of our first go around with our research at NMSU is what we saw is certain crops, particularly winter wheat planted like now, and then it's allowed to come up and then harvested. The weed reduction was something on the order, my friends, about 98% over a 2-year period. Whereas if we just did a tillage practice of corn, we looked at that, weeds came back to like a 50% level. And then looking at bare ground, yeah, lots of weeds. We don't consider that a cover. We're looking at more of a managed.
When Dwayne asked you about this, you went right straight to cover crop and didn't say, when he was talking about weeds, that's why I wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, no, I understand. Appreciate that. Thank you for the comment.
Thank you, Mr. Longman. Mr. Salt.
You know, you've got your graph up there and you see it, 50s, went down and came back up, 70s. Now you have the 80s drop. Do you ever look at why that's not coming back? You've got a little water. Since 80s actually. How many people south of Marietta County compared to, we only still got 90,640 acres. I mean, we're actually farming 7. So what, how come it's not, take that, where's that water going? It's, the people came in this outfit. I mean, it's not the farmers. You're putting everything on the farmers. Hi, they love to pick on farmers. People are coming, they're coming. So we're gonna have to figure out something, or depending on the lake, which, farmers, they know it's slow down up there too.
Mr. Longman.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Salopek, point well taken. Why is there this precipitous decline? Number one is drought.
Well, I know that, but look at the other back in the 70s, the 50s
Came back up.
and it's gonna rain again. My grandpa said the cloud in the sky, it's gonna rain.
That's fair, but I mean, I mean, there are a number of different reasons, and I can appreciate the idea of the municipal pumping I think we're talking about. During this time period, the municipal pumping stayed the same, more or less. The consumption of use stayed the same, particularly because we have less irrigated acreage in production than a full 90. So there are a number of factors there, and you know what I'd like to do is just go back to my experts so that they can break down, you know, what their thoughts are. And Mr. Chairman, if that's a appropriate response.
It is.
I'm not.
I appreciate that. I can clarify from my viewpoint, Salt's comment. It is important that there are contributions from contributors other than just the farming. So I appreciate the fact that there's an appropriation in the state indicating that this is a public concern and not a farmer problem.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make one more comment.
Please.
You know, I've done a number of presentations over time. And, you know, when I was putting this presentation together, I was looking back at it and it's like, you know, this is just talking about irrigators. And so it's in the beginning, we started a conversation with the city of Las Cruces, not fully developed. Started a conversation with some of my team and then some the conservation program to start thinking about how could we put together a group that really is going to focus on urban conservation and improve that. And we're getting a positive response so far, but we're just first steps. But that needs to be folded into our overall plan and made explicit. And right now, what we presented, it was not. And so, for that, I apologize. That was my bad. But I'm looking to fix that. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Ms. Stallman.
And for what it's worth, John, the city of Las Cruces has a resolution that's been in place since the beginning of the drought that says they will take action during a drought to cut back their water supply, and they have not one time implemented its use. Not once.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Brunswick.
I have just one quick question on this data. I know that you guys have accumulated your data internally, obviously we have here as well. I was curious, where are you guys gathering your data from? But that's a pretty large discrepancy in the data. Are you guys using kind of the same measuring points, or how do you guys aggregate your data? Would you be able to provide us your data set?
I believe so. I mean, if I'm putting it up here, I think we can provide it. I'm not sure where we're all that different, but
I think you're specifically talking after 2012. Or numbers. So we have 2012 where we have that sharp precipitation line.
Well, their analysis ends earlier than ours.
Right. Well, I want the underlying data, their analysis.
Right there, we're pretty consistent. Right in here, Dr. Fox has shown something going up. We end here, and then Dr. Fox shows it going down. So I think we're using Dr. Fox's endpoint and this beginning point to get to the 250,000. So we've done our best to try to coordinate that data. This is kind of a period when a lot of the models ended for obvious reasons. But certainly, certainly I can commit to working with Dr. Fox to try to figure out how we can share data.
And the salt mix point. Let me let Dr. Fox answer first.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, I have that data. I'm familiar with its origin. It hails from old Bureau of Reclamation monitoring wells that actually synonymous with EBID piezometers in terms of location, relative location, essentially side by side. Via a grant from the Interstate Stream Commission, 2008, we received place. There are some that date older than what we have, but nevertheless, I do have that data set. It's been QA/QC, for its time and methods that were in place in those days. It's reasonable. But I would take this opportunity to point out that while I don't necessarily disagree with the characterization of the system as presently being in mine condition, which has occurred in years past, I would point out that the system continues to demonstrate resilience. That is a very important consideration insofar as, for example, in 2017, we got a 2-foot allotment. Boom. It responded immediately, popped right back up, right? We get another one or two of those, particularly if they happen to be back to back, we could expect to see similar response. And so I just think it's important to clarify that while yes, we have seen something of a free fall in recent years, there is cause to consider a degree of optimism that given due management, which Mr. Longworth is addressing here, and I support that we can expect that the system will respond and will respond positively. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. And I'll also note Dr. Fox's analysis is year-over-year analysis. We're not really interested in the intra-year noise. And the other data set is, I'm guessing that's probably a monthly data
I believe that's correct. It might be biannual.
So the up and downs you see particularly in the eighties, that's not from one year to the next, that's showing the impacts of, the on and off cycle in the irrigation system. Mrs. Beth?
Mr. Longworth, the meeting in Anthony, there was some discussion about how many acres would need to be taken out, before we would see an impact. And while, you know, we don't know the exact number, I think one of the numbers we discussed was perhaps 9,000 acres. And we currently have about 2,000 in the program. So I think that's just an interesting piece of information for this group to know, but I want to make sure we're understanding them correctly. So I'll just re-ask the question: how many acres would need for us to see some impact?
So, for those who didn't see the article from the New Mexican, I actually think the reporter got it right, and that the research shows about 7,000 acres to get the system more into balance. Now, I think there's some opportunity in there to think of, and again, this goes back to community conversations and continuing to partner going ahead of like, what are the different kinds of activities that we can do to reduce that? Certainly, you know, some of you may know, I've been, I did the PACOS program. We saw some stuff there. We want to improve upon that. And the number one thing that comes to my mind is community conversation. What are the ideas to Dr. King and Dr. Fox and this board, the experience that we can get to not having to keep leasing 7,000 acres. That's not our goal this time. Our goal is to, you know, if we make 3,000, we'd be, that'd be great. But step at a time. Step at a time.
Thank you, Ms. Esslinger. Thank you, Mr. Longworth.
Mr. Longworth, what's not in this information either, because now that we're talking acres, how many small parcels of land that's lost their wells and stuff like that they're not already farming? If you got that included in that, set it down, because there's quite a bit of that out there. I see up down the valley where they're not already farming it. Is that included in this? Because if it is, then it probably needs to be.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lack, could you say that again? I'm not trying to be quiet.
No, that's fine. I see a lot of tracts of land that are small, where, you know, you get to a place where if you got 10 or 15 acres, your well goes down, they're not replacing those wells, they're just looking at that and that's it. And so that's not being farmed no more, and it's out any canal water. Where people have been short on water, they're sure not going out there and renting that ground. Okay. Right. So there's a ton of that out there that wasn't out there 10 years ago. How many acres do you have in your program? Have you assessed that acres, put it in the formula? Because that's going to be growing. It's kind of something I think we sure need to look at.
So the question of have we looked at the overall irrigated acres, and in our modeling, have we taken account for the smaller acreage that hasn't come back in? I would say up to 2018 point, yes. And my understanding is this may have been extended by some of our experts. And so we would be doing a similar kind of analysis of looking at irrigated, non-irrigated to help populate that kind of analysis. So,
because those people don't qualify for the program, and to me, they should. That's my choosing.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Mr. Esslinger.
We've got same question as the listening session. Your program is a couple of years old and it's being funded by the state. We've been doing a program for at least 10 years of piping our laterals, finding a considerable amount of statings. Back when we're thinking about piping 4 miles, and just our numbers are indicating 11,000 acres of savings of water. Is there any way that that program of ours could be helpful, matched by the state, so that we can continue that piping of our infrastructure, so that we can certainly save water, pumping water into our canal system that's pipe versus a dirt line ditch, as also as far as water conservation and efficiency delivery in a drought period to a farmer in a pipeline rather than a dirt line ditch? Is there an opportunity for that discussion to happen?
Mr. Chairman, Treasurer Manager Esslinger, absolutely would like to have that conversation. We talked about it on Friday. And so I haven't had a chance to talk to the state engineer, so I haven't been able to, kind of get the state where he's at. My expectation is we certainly can have that conversation and try to come up with a way to be able to match something like that. It's my best understanding from the appropriation language, something like that would be permissible. But if apparently as an engineer, I'm not allowed to read appropriation language, so now I'm kind of kidding there a little bit, but I want, let's have that conversation. Absolutely. And then
I was gonna say, we're missing a piece of the conversation.
maybe we could look to go for a grant opportunity. We have somebody that's on temporary detail from ABCWA, whatever they're called, Alphabet Soup, Albuquerque, who has a lot of grant writing experience and as a team knows how to grant write. And so I've started a conversation with her about looking at some of the grants that have come out of Water Smart, the recent advertisements. And that's another area we're thinking about, because that money is, I think, best used as a cost match. So if we can put together a project and then that, that fits the criteria of the grant, we can provide that cost match. That's one of the areas where I know the money is intended for.
That's great to hear, because in the past, our Water Smart grants that we've gotten, we pretty much farmers that had matched that cost there, and we're looking for other folks to help us with, because we think projects are great, especially in these times, water around more efficient.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, actually, I was going to add to that, again, the state has already reached out to me and offered to continue that discussion. And one of the clarifying points regarding today was that this is a piece of what we will be doing, but not the whole puzzle. And there are still lots of discussions to be had, like what does longer term solutions look like in the form of desal, even bringing water into the basin, but doing more with what we have here, piping projects, stormwater capture, all of those things coming together. So I want to be clear that the state has, even though not through John, the state has, as of yesterday, already reached out to me on the first day back from my vacation after we attended the sessions last week. So they are pushing forward with continuing the discussion on what else can we do so that it doesn't have to be 7,000 or 9,000 acres. If we can make up X number of acre feet and knock off 1,000 acres of farmland that we have to follow, that's ultimately this board's goal. That's what you put me out to do the work on, right? So the state has come to me and said, absolutely, we are still there with you. And then obviously the Bureau of Reclamation is here today, and they will probably reiterate the same sort of sentiment. I will not speak for Jennifer though.
Thank you. Mr. Longwood, thank you.
No, I get the web, like that long, get to the state engineer's website.
I'm going to express my appreciation for you coming and listening to our peers, the listening session, for coming today to present to the board of directors. I will offer to the public, are there any questions from the public for Mr. Longwood? Yes.
Yes, sir. The chart, the graph you had up there, the aquifer drawdown, what's the area of that? Is that the aquifer, is that the district or is that statewide?
Oh, that's essentially for the Mesilla Valley.
So that's for the Mesilla Valley, was the answer.
The Mesilla Valley.
The lower Rio Grande.
I do not believe so, no.
So roughly the district.
So the lower Rio Grande from Rincon South.
We can call it on south.
Correct.
Okay, not from.
Correct. That was the answer given from Rincon South. Data set.
I have one other question, sir.
Sure.
For the board or whatever. How much water did you release this year? And do you have some idea of what percentage of that returns to groundwater?
So on the first question, we'll be getting to that later in our agenda when we get to water resources. And on the next question for that, I suspect you're going to hear some delivery efficiency numbers. And so you can relate to, from that, how much of it is going to the recharge.
Thank you, sir.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, reason why I wanted to bring up the internet real quick is one thing that I did not mention is what's coming up. So on this slide here, we're going to be having application information sessions starting September 22nd. We're going to have two sessions, and in these sessions, we're going to go through the application and go through the online GIS system to show people how to fill out the application and create a map. So on the 22nd, we're going to be up in Hatch in the afternoon, 3 to 4:30, 5 to 6:30. So I'll have two sessions there. Then on the September 23rd, which is that Saturday, this is Friday, Saturday, somebody's complaining like, dude, what are you doing? Like having Friday afternoon meetings? Just like, trust me, it's not my fault. But kidding aside, we want to make sure we're out in the community. So on Saturday, we have 9:30 to 10:30, again, 12 to 12:30 in Anthony. This is the same place where we had the listening session. And then later that afternoon, we'll be back in the Corbett Center at NMSU. So those are going to be happening starting a week from Friday. So we just, we're doing a quick turn on what we heard, and so I just want to make that announcement. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Longman. Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. President. John, this sounds, history repeating itself on paper. That's the situation that we're living in. In that scenario, though, we had an end game. End game was we get 12,500 feet across the state line, so we compact the lizards. So with that in mind, CID worked with the state of here, as you've done here, to start with a leasing program. Which was a pilot, just like your pilot program. And so we had an idea about how many acres farmers were willing to lease at that point in time. And ultimately, the Interstate Expense Commission that purchased that acre, so that they wouldn't have to rent on that. We had to work with the Bureau of Reclamation and get a contract that was satisfactory. The Bureau obviously always concerned about the viability of the project when you start taking acres out of the project. So we had an end game. I don't hear an end game here. I don't hear a number of where we're trying to get to. Who else? Could you shed some light on?
Mr. Chairman, first thing I want to point out is that within CID in those situations, the hydrology is a little different. And one of the things we had there is we had a United States Supreme Court decree. So we had a very clear goal that was spelled out by the United States Supreme Court. We're not in that situation right now. I'm sure, I try to keep out of it, but certainly I'm aware that we're in front of the court and there's briefing schedules going on. And so if the court adopts, I'm not, be premature to talk about what the court may or may not do. So to that extent, we don't have that situation. If we do get into that situation, then that will be something that we're going to have to sit down and talk about, like, working together to talk of reclamation, working with your guys' staff, thinking about, okay, how do we prepare for that? That this is just a part of that puzzle of how we prepare in the event that the court does adopt the proposed consent decree.
Thank you, Mr. Longman. Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. And with that, won't keep you any longer. We appreciate the exceptional amount of time you granted us for our questions. And we look forward to continuing the discussion.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. So that brings us on our agenda. Commissioner Bobby Scott. Commissioner, we appreciate you coming in, meet with us today. We hope that you will stick around for the rest of our meeting and enjoy having lunch with us. With that, I grant you the floor. Say anything you choose.
I didn't have any thing prepared, just came to attend. I did attend one of the listening sessions. The following program is interesting. I do think there are a few aspects, like the cover crop is a huge one. There needs to be some kind of criteria that if there is not going to be a cover crop, that ground is kept clean. I don't necessarily understand the not allowing any surface water use on that. I don't know. I thought when I got here a little bit late, apologize, but you guys are still available. The farmers are eligible for federal crop insurance, they can PP that land and still consider it PP under your all's program. So those are some planning.
Yeah.
And things, so that was just a question that comes up. I think a collaboration with EBID is going to definitely pay you all more dividends than what you get, because the location of the fallowing, I think their word lessons learned on the Pecos, where you don't need to have everything fallowed at one farm at the end of a 10-mile canal where you have to run water those distances, extremely inefficient. And so I think a lot of those things, and I think to Gary's point, the overall efficiencies that can be gained, if it's not necessarily 100% through fallowing, but some other levers that you all have to increase your efficiencies are very, very big. But I think that it sounded like Samantha has been in contact with the state quite a bit, so it sounded like maybe there is some collaboration taking place now. Very, very positive. But, I also, one last thing I do like, I know you guys are probably working towards a more permanent solution, but the 2 years and the 4 years, for me as a farmer, I'm sitting here saying, I would like that plan. I don't know that from a state funding issue and things that's viable in the long term, but that means that those acres go out for a while, but then come back. And that permanent fallowing as a farmer is not something I like to see. If you lay something out for 2 years, farm it for 4, lay it out for 2, a farmer can plan for that and move that around and things. So just some of the structure of your plan, I think you guys are on a good path, but I do think some tweaks could be made to improve it. I also do agree with this does not need to be 100% on the backs of the farmer. You've got cities, you've got municipal use, you've got industrial use that are depleting it as well. And those folks need to pony up and pay their fair share as well. So that would be kind of the extent of my comments. I don't know if you guys got any questions for me.
That's the Commissioner asked. Are there any questions from the board of directors? Mr. Sullivan?
Probably not any answers, but go ahead.
How's it going back with you? So I know you've been out of the problem. You know, a lot of these other guys. Yeah.
You know, everything hit pretty fast and furious. I think it's important. One of the things I did want to do, and I know you learn very quickly in this, you're certainly not going to have everybody happy in this, but the position that we're in, the litigation and things and where we are with that, I think we're on the right path. This is going on. Everyone has expended multi-million dollars over the years of this, and I think that where we are, we hopefully have something that will be workable for the 2 districts to be able to meet. We will see. Nothing is over with yet, but we shall see. So I think the compact is working well. I think the New Mexico commissioner was a real good fit with Mike. I think that's been a very good process. Yeah.
I'll note that as we start talking about the Rio Grande Compact, it started ready to catch dogs, so. Appreciate it. Mr. Franzoy,
You mentioned about using surface water here at EBID on that fallow land, right?
Yeah.
Part of it, growing cover crops, call it, to help kind of prevent erosion and dust and stuff like that. We actually had that discussion Friday, and to open the discussion and say, can we use surface water on that for 2 reasons? One is, preventive care, cleaning up your fields, keeping the weeds out and everything. The second is that if you really want to recharge the aquifer, spreading that surface water over does 2 things. One, pushes down the salts deeper in the aquifer. And the second thing that it does is it recharges it over a wider period of time
for the areas that you'd be specifically targeting, right? So that discussion, I just wanted to state that you brought it up, we talked about it Friday, that is going to be an open discussion to see how we can work through that. Ryan was there at that meeting as well, and it's just kind of a challenge of how do we monitor that to make sure they're not using groundwater on those lands, so just wanted to kind of.
Yeah, the policing of it makes it more difficult, but I'm speaking as a farmer, I'm saying, sorry, it's a little more difficult to police. It's the right thing to do. All of us have fallowed ground over the years. You lay it out for 2 years, it's difficult. You get salt buildup and germination issues like that after you lay it out for 2 years.
No, definitely. So I just want to say we opened up kind of a gate to have those discussions between us. So
Good.
thank you, Mr. Salve.
I was wondering about that too. I was wondering, so what are we gonna do with all that water? Am I gonna sell it or am I gonna give it to my neighbor? Or, you know, I got 3 inches, I have to pay $90 an acre. Nobody's gonna pay that, so I'm stuck with the water. Now, what am I gonna do? Leave it in the lake? Or, you know, put it in the drain? You know, I don't know. I'd better put on, instead of pumping for it back in the ground, it's my water. That's what.
I don't think you're probably transferring that onto your other.
Onto your other. Do that too. Yeah.
So we'll let Commissioner Scove off the hook on that one. I don't think he has the question to that, Mr. Salve.
I know he don't have an answer. I just brought that up.
Other questions for our compact commission? I appreciate you being here today, Commissioner Scove, very, very much. And I look forward to sharing lunch with you if you're ever interested.
I'm not gonna be able to do lunch with you guys, but thank you very much.
You are always welcome in our meetings.
We shall see.
With that, next item on the agenda is a presentation by the Big Groundwater District. And I would ask Dr. Fox, would you please introduce our guests, and then I welcome them to give a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's not so much a presentation of sorts, but rather just an intro. I first became acquainted with Heather Rice with the Bingham Groundwater District back last fall at Family Farm Alliance in Reno. And actually it was our council, my bud Samantha, that introduced us. And in the ensuing months, we've become friends, acquainted as far as comparing notes with respect to issues, you know, that they're dealing with out there in southeastern Idaho, and that we're dealing with down here on the borderland. And as such, I also became acquainted with Alan Jackson, manager. I can tell you on no uncertain terms that these are people of impeccable character. They care very deeply about what they do and who they do it for. One of the things that impresses me so much is that they're not waiting around for Idaho Department of Water Resources to show them the light as far as how to deal with problems that they're have to deal with. But they're branching out, going different places, different conferences, visiting places, and asking questions and learning. And that's a big part of why they are here. Of all the places that perhaps they could visit, I'm very honored that they would choose to come all this way to visit with us. Alan, he worked in Yuma, worked with the Bureau. He's familiar with issues in this part of the world, what happened there. So again, I feel as though it's an honor that they made the trip to come out here. I'd like to take some time to impress upon you the significance of the eastern state plain aquifer that they're dealing with, but I know we're a little bit behind schedule here, so I'll abbreviate and stress to you that that is an enormous resource out there. Almost 11,000 square miles, transmissivity anywhere from 10,000 to 1 billion feet squared per day. It's one of the most productive aquifers, if not the most. Salted fractured system, volcanic, very unique, very special, major watershed that feeds the Snake River. But yet, with such tremendous resources at their disposal, the groundwater districts in particular are facing some very difficult times. And with that, I would turn it over to Alan Jackson to perhaps provide some insight into some of these struggles.
Sure. Thank
Ready to stand here?
It is fine, yes.
All right, yeah, and I don't have a presentation. Yeah, I'm Al Jackson, as the said. Yeah, so our groundwater district, Bingham Groundwater District is located in southeastern Idaho. It's about 150,000 acres of groundwater irrigated land. And as I mentioned, we pump out of Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer in that area. And Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer is hydrologically connected to the Snake River. And they contribute to each other multiple times as they flow through the state. And the issue that we've seen is that the aquifer level has declined. In fact, as we were looking at the graph of the aquifer decline here, very, very similar graph that we had there. You know, it started to decline significantly in the late 80s or the 90s. See a little bit of reprieve there, and then it comes back down. Very, very similar decline in it. And that's kind of one of the reasons why it was intriguing to come down here, because we also have a lot of surface water irrigation in our area. And so looking at the old computer irrigation district, there's a lot of similarities. There's a conjunctive management component to it. And so we kind of wanted to come down and see the issues down here. And again, a lot of the discussion that's been happening here, you can change the names and this could be a meeting in Idaho. You know, it's very, very similar discussions going on. And so, you know, and interestingly, I always pointed out up there how bad we are at overcoming the aquifer. The level of Lake Mead has dropped at the same rate too. So we've even affected Lake Mead burning. But I think there's a broader component happening there, but you know, if we're going to blame it on groundwater compressions. No. So, no, but like I said, thank you for letting us sit in on this. It's been very interesting and interesting learning about everything. So appreciate the time and let us sit in and observe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen.
Any other comments from our guests?
I know you're behind time. I'll just be quick. I'm Bill Anderson. I'm the attorney there for Big Groundwater District. And, you know, we have our unique problems, but as Alan said, you could change the names of the things. We've been giggling back here because everything you're saying is exactly what we're on. But I did see one unique thing. I just wanted to point it out to you. We have a situation there where a lot of our surface water users are disincentivized to become more efficient. Whether it's worried about losing their water right, or they've already got some of the waste that they're using in other avenues or other systems. So I'll just kind of speak to your representative here. If Gary's saying, hey, we want some money to improve our system and line our canals, take advantage of it. Because, you know, we talk about following land, and that's a good short-term solution, but eventually that land is gonna have to come back, right? No, nobody wants to do that forever. You improve a system, especially a system that's been around for 100 years and will be around for 100 years, and you can get some savings off of that, that's money in the bank. I mean, that's the low-hanging fruit. So if you can get that into those systems, grab onto it, latch onto it. You got willing partners to actually improve their efficiencies. We would kill for that. So, you know, whatever influence you might have, I'll just point that out to you. I really think that's going to be your benefit.
I'll keep going.
Yeah. Send him to tap.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those comments, and I appreciate your visit. We often get very focused on our own problem, trying to understand it and have our own solutions. And we sometimes miss the low-hanging fruit because we didn't come at it from the right perspective. So I appreciate you making the journey down here to visit with us, to understand where we're similar and where we have unique solutions that perhaps the other can utilize. Mrs. Alpert?
I just would like to say the same thing. Thank you for coming to join us. We've seen each other often. We do the same sorts of lobbying activities together on a national scale. And so it is something that we try to do behind the scenes quite a bit, sharing information across the West among irrigation districts or entities similarly situated, maybe not an irrigation district, but in the past, EBID has taken its own field trips to other places. We often send small contingencies, but getting people coming to us also can be very helpful. So kudos to Gary and Eric for helping pave the way to get them out there. But a big thank you to you guys also for coming, because it does help keep those connections strong. So that when we do have to go to DC to get some, you know, work done, then we have that network created already.
And it rained when you showed up.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. You are always welcome here in New Mexico, especially at Health and Irrigation. Thank you very much, Dr. Thought. That brings us to our next item of business, water resources. Dr. King.
Just a moment, compression down. Okay. Okay.
Hear that. Sorry.
I'm actually doing this on one screen, so bear with. I guess they do it this way. Is that working out there in TV land? Awesome, so. Okay, this is, again, sort of a slow part. EBID is shut down, EP1 in Mexico continue to run, but I'll give you an update on where we stand right now. Here we are. These are current conditions as of September 11th. That's right, midnight on September 11th. We had 375,000 in Elephant Butte, 14,000 in Caballo. So you see total project storage of 390. At some point we went into Article 7. Jen, do you know when we went into Article 7?
The letter came out yesterday.
Okay. So just into Article 7, not a real big issue this year because there's obviously Ovato's under construction anyhow. That's a rough estimate of Rio Grande compact credit water. It's actually slightly less than that, but fairly inconsequential. We've got about 22,000 that's tied up as dead storage in Elephant Butte and Caballo. So we have a total not releasable of about 21,000. And the question came up, how much had we released? And you see 495,000 as of the end of Monday. And your question, Jerry, right? Yes. How much of that is going into groundwater recharge? There's two parts to that. I'll talk about one part, James can talk about the other. But considering the diversion ratio, something on the order of 10% of that is going into recharge in the river. Then after so from release to diversion, something like 10%. So let's say 50,000 acre feet. James will talk a little bit about conveyance as well. And the difference is mostly groundwater recharge. Not all, but mostly groundwater recharge. That leaves us with a seasonal supply of about 863,000. And note that the net inflow, which is the release plus the change in storage at Elephant Butte, is negative, and it's been negative since our last meeting. I don't expect it to go positive for any significant amount of time. We may have a few little flashes that come through, but you'll remember last time I was talking about if we got a little help from the monsoon, maybe we'd have some carryover spill. We didn't get any help from the monsoon. San Marcial has basically been dry in the river. The low flow conveyance channel is showing a bit of flow, but the metering station is upstream of the swamp. And so evaporation, changes in bank storage, all this nets out to about losing 380 acre feet per day. And again, I don't expect that to change until New Mexico starts moving water down into Elephant Butte starting November 1st. This is what the flow in the river was looking like yesterday. You notice that it's all well below average. This is percent of average over here. That's the red line you see. And you got this big spike here at Otoe gauge. It's not showing up at Embudo, which is right upstream on the main stem. The difference between Embudo and Otoe, of course, the big difference is Rio Chama comes in there. And what is happening now is they are moving water down from Abiquiu to Cochiti and building up Cochiti. And this was in the annual operating plan. They'll build that up in Cochiti and then November 1st or so start releasing it down. I got that about right?
Yeah, the reason is the Corps of Engineers has a project in Abiquiu that they need the water levels drop. So normally they would have left it in Abiquiu and released it from there, but they're having to move to Cochiti so they can start their project.
And this is all, this is very consistent with the plan that's been out there since certainly June. So that's what's happening there. You see a zero or near zero at Bernardo. That's real San Marcial. Again, the river channel is dry there. As I was driving down this morning, the tributaries, Rio Parco, Salado, all the way down to Percha Creek, they were kind of drizzling in a little bit. It's not anything that I would expect to have a major effect on river gauges or reservoir storage. Our precipitation as a percentage of average has continued to decline. And that is because, as you go through the year, the cumulative precipitation, the expected cumulative precipitation would be increasing. We really haven't had enough precipitation to keep up anywhere close to it. So we're going, what was a very good early year is now a mediocre late water year. Again, this will reset October 1st with the beginning of the new water year. So this will come around when I get to my summary and conclusions here. It hasn't been a good month since our last meeting in terms of precipitation. Looking at the outlook for September, this was issued, I'm sorry, this says July 20th, that should be August 31st. That's when these were issued. You can see they're still expecting below precipitation and above average temperatures. We've certainly had the above average temperatures and not much of a monsoon season. So more of same, I guess is what you could say here. New Mexico now is entirely in some range of abnormally dry to, we haven't gotten the exceptional drought yet, but abnormally dry to extreme drought. And you can expect these red areas to expand between now and next month as assuming our monsoon doesn't get in gear, and there's really not a lot of sign that it is doing so. So expect, again, more of the same.
Dr. King, you have a previous one in your presentation. What's the trend there? So I'm noticing that large swath of the central west now out of drought. All the way up through Wyoming.
Well, atmospheric rivers, lingering over from that. They've actually gotten more precipitation since then than we have as well. I haven't paid too much attention to, pardon me, southeastern Idaho, parts up there. But certainly California's been getting a lot more precipitation than we have even since the atmospheric rivers.
I would point out, Mr. Chairman, if I may, the headwaters of the Snake aren't looking too good in terms of being dry up there in the Panhandle. So kind of in the same boat we are.
Do we need boats though?
I don't know. Ms. Franklin, I looked at this. How is this data accumulated? Because it says it's in drought, right? These areas. So I just moved from Minnesota 6 months ago.
and I can tell you there ain't a water problem. Right? So how is this data aggregated? What are they looking at? Is it precipitation specifically? Is it there? Because I know that there's 11,000 lakes in that state, right? So how do you come up with this data?
Well, the major indicators that they use are precipitation and precipitation history. They look at soil moisture. I believe temperature has an effect on this. It's kind of a Palmer drought index type thing. And so it's integrated a little over time. It doesn't look very deep. In other words, it doesn't say anything about your aquifer conditions. It does consider things like soil moisture, but not really getting down into, if your aquifer is down by 250,000 acre feet, that's not reflected in the drought.
And is it comparative based on, so let's say New Mexico, and you're saying soil dryness, moisture, is that comparative to New Mexico specifically, or is that comparative to an overall standard?
It's definitely site specific. If we were on the same scale with Minnesota, we would always be in drought and they would always be not in
Right,
drought.
so that's where that probably discrepancy comes from, dry for
Right.
that.
And it's relative to some sort of sense of central tendency for a location.
Just wanted to kind of.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Francois. Thank you, Dr. King.
On the seasonal outlook, again, not much optimistic here. Persistent drought. If it's not persistent drought, it's likely to develop. So again, here we are. It hasn't been a good month, as I say. El Nino is getting kind of wild here. I'm not entirely convinced that this has nearly as strong correlation with our water supply as it does out in California. But if you recall on this graph, the vertical axis is time going from this time last year up to the, I hate other people's keyboards, up to the present. And then the horizontal axis, left to right, is going across the equatorial Pacific, looking 5 degrees north and 5 degrees south at the sea surface temperature anomalies. So this is the sea surface temperature minus the average for this time of year, all the way across the unit. Again, it's a function of where you are in the ocean. The average varies across the ocean. But this is really warming up right there off the coast of Ecuador and Peru. And it's greater than 95% chance of persisting through the winter period. That's about as sure a thing as you get. So if you believe that El Nino will help our snowpack, maybe we get some help there. I will tell you that there isn't much correlation between our monsoon and the following snowpack. So that's somewhat comforting, and that's not really an indicator. The fact that we've had a failed monsoon thus far is not really an indicator that we'll have a poor snow season. So the snow season, get your coin out and give it a flip.
Dr. King, I saw a presentation from Dr. Brown from the University of Arizona recently. And he was talking, he was breaking the cycle up into strong El Niños and strong El Niños as well. His conclusions seem to suggest that when you weren't in a strong position either way, the rest of it was noise. That it was, who knows what it's going to be, it's noise. And particularly for us, the strong El Nino correlated to snowpack in our watershed south of the Colorado border. North of the Colorado border, the correlation declined.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen those data sets, you have an opinion on them, and are we moving towards a strong El Nino or?
Well, I have not seen the specific data sets that Dr. Brown would have been well, he's much more current than I am on this. I have over the years tried to relate El Nino to snowpack and monsoon separately, and monsoon to snowpack, which didn't work. I probably put, in what you just said, I probably put a little too much focus on north of the Colorado border in trying to relate El Nino to snowpack, because that's where the big snow is. But yeah, it's very noisy. And that goes back, we've got, I forget how far back the El Nino data sets go, but it's mid last century or so.
Thank you, Dr. King, I appreciate that.
Anyhow, I'm sure it'll be a wild ride. In conclusion, then, we are losing water in Elephant Butte at this, or losing net project supply inflow at this point. As you saw, the drought is likely to intensify and persist. We will get that late year inflow from moving water down in November and December. That'll be out. That'll be when we are finished allocating water for this year. We'll probably have one more allocation this year, and then end of year reconciliation that'll be based on October 31st conditions. There is a possibility still that we will get some carryover spill from El Paso #1. I was trying to do the calculations to see, if I took the conditions that I gave you on that first slide, those conditions, what would the allocation be? The way El Paso #1 is using water, where would they wind up? They have a cap on their carryover of 233,000. And I was coming up with them having like 220,000 acre feet in carryover, but I don't know their exact shutoff date. They haven't set one. I couldn't get a clear answer on that, but it's going to be very close. And if we do get a spill, it isn't going to be a big one. It's not going to be 77,000 like we had back in 2019. Figure, 10,000 acre feet, maybe zero. In fact, I'm kind of leaning towards zero the way that river is going right now.
Reasonable to expect them to manage their water resources in a way to minimize carryovers. That's a reasonable estimate.
When discussing their end of season, I talked to Al Blair about it, and he basically says, well, it depends on what our orders are. And, they have a lot of the same issues that we do, where you've got like cotton growers that want to get an early irrigation in, and pecan growers who want to leave it perhaps till the end of the year down there. And then they've got the city of El Paso. I don't really see them specifically trying to manage to use it or lose it. I think they'll probably run as long as the orders support it. I also did run a look at what Mexico's end of year looks like, and assuming they go through, they're running at pretty much their maximum capacity right now, 5 cubic meters per second. If they continue to do that, they would have to run into November to use their entire allocation, which is not going to happen. So Mexico, as we expected, and I think I told you when we went to 60,000, they will leave water behind. And that water will, since they don't have carryover, that water will go into the 2024 allocation pool to the 2 districts in Mexico.
Thank you, Dr. King. Mr. Esling.
Dr. King, do you have any inkling of an idea of when they may stop ordering water? Early October, mid-October?
Well, I can't get an answer on that.
Yeah.
Wait and see is, but typically, yeah, you'd be talking early to mid-October. But remains to be seen. One other thing I did look at is what our carryover is going to look like. And that too is a little uncertain. Just to give you an idea of the uncertainty, it's very dependent on the diversion ratio. And the diversion ratio, I ran a couple of scenarios with our allocation, and James has got a initial cut at our final charges. So if I assume a diversion ratio, and I didn't put it in here because I didn't actually want to put it in writing, it's a very informal analysis, but to give you some idea how volatile trying to estimate our carryover at this point would be, if I assume a diversion ratio of 0.8, I get about 16,000 acre feet of carryover. If I assume a diversion ratio of 0.82, I get 31,000 acre feet of carryover. So those little changes in diversion ratio can have a pretty good effect on the amount of carryover. Those 0.8 and 0.82 are reasonably conservative numbers. So let me just say we will have a bit of carryover going into 2024 of our own and possibly supplemented with a spill.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Hearing none, thank you very much, Dr. King, and I hand it over to Mr. Narvaez.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just like a quick, interject, Dr. King makes a very good point insofar as, illustrating the sensitivity and the importance of the diversion ratio. And, building on that, comments exchanged earlier from our friends, in Idaho in terms of encouraging improving efficiency in the system, the piping projects and related, I would add to that, that those activities will tend to improve the diversion ratio. In which case, even minor improvements can result in perhaps a minor adjustment in the diversion ratio, but as Dr. King has illustrated, that can end up producing quite a bit of water. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. Thank you very much, Dr. King.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Glad to be with you today. Yeah.
Turn on the screen, Terry.
I believe. Alrighty, let's see if we can zoom this in just a little bit.
Okay.
I can't see. So I took out my contacts yesterday because my eyes have been messed up and my son's eyes are messed up. So we're both walking around the house like this or something. So now I got my glasses on. Now I'm in between my range here. So we did get some preliminary numbers, so just we can kind of more or less look and see where we're going to be. We're probably going to be pretty close to what we're presenting today. Of course, El Paso's still running. So you know they're moving along. But as far as EBID is concerned, we set out a target early on, which was going to be those the 14-inch allotment, and basically we nailed it. Pretty close to where we needed to, and where we ended up with the season, and all our projections, we pretty much hit it. Obviously, we would have loved to continue to irrigate. Of course, we have some farmers here that still want to continue to irrigate, and you know, if we had that water available, and there's no doubt we would have been able to meet any other targets we would have got. But anyway, we did settle with the 14 inches. That was our plan going into the season, so we kind of stuck to that. We knew we had a little bit of cushion because there's some water available in there, so but we still ran a tight ship. We didn't get too lackadaisical at the end. We tried to make sure that we continued with the plan that we had set forward, the board set forward, and so we hit pretty good. So let me just do a recap for you. Since July, we're still the last board meeting. We're in the middle of finishing some numbers. I want to just recap July for you. July again was another high use, which is one of the highest that we've had in a while. We did use 65,885 acre feet. The charge to the farmer, 31,000, which means that's the water that got to the actual farms. We irrigated cumulative 62,459 acres, irrigating approximately 3,759 irrigations. So the efficiency rating for that, and we were talking about efficiency and how much of the water goes back to the aquifer, we could probably stay with the 10%. Also within here, there's other factors that go involved with it, but this number here is at 49%. Now the July took a little bit of a dip just because toward the end of the array irrigation season, they're going to be in the same boat that that the Mesilla Valley was in,
where demand dropped off, and we're just trying to maintain enough water to get the orders out that did still have water available. So that efficiency took a hit on those months because we weren't running fast and furious on the tail end of the seasons. That's typical with the startup, as you can see at 37%. And then as we finished the season for the array in July, took a little bit of a dive. You can see that we always target some around 55% efficiency when we do set allocation allotments and those kind of things. And we did hit that target when we're going full force, which was in June. So it's good to see the numbers get close to what we always try to target. And that was a good thing to see. We did see that we were going to drop a little bit in July just because of the tail end again of the array. So moving on to August, which primarily was just in the Sea Valley. You can see that we diverted 29,080 acre feet. Charged to the farmer, 10,043 acre feet. Acres irrigated, 22,852. Irrigation wise, 1,655. Again, same impact with the delivery, diversion efficiency, just simply because towards the last week of irrigation season, demand dropped, but we still had to maintain a certain amount of water in our canals in order to even deliver that demand. So that's kind of where we ended up with the season. We didn't have an official number as far as the allotment because it kept changing. So what I did is I just used our projection of saying 14 inches. How much are we going to need? The numbers came pretty close to 192. As you can see, we ended up with a district balance of 2716. Essentially, that's hitting it right on the target. We're normally on the closer to zero, or maybe even negative. So we did pretty good as far as that's concerned, hitting our target. So that's good news on the models that we put up, and it shows that all these years we've been kind of preparing for this. We can pretty much hit what we need to hit whenever we make our decision to start the season. Just a quick numbers for Texas deliveries. Again, for the whole season, we had 135 irrigations. We irrigated approximately 1,000 acres and 530 acre feet that we delivered to Texas. And then on the flip side, Texas delivers for us 201 irrigations, 2,973 acres, 1,343 acre feet charged to the farmer. Any questions on this particular spreadsheet? All right. I'll just give you a quick breakdown of the numbers individually for each of the diversions, and we're just going to put it on over. And I'll recap July, since we didn't get a chance to look at it completely. Excuse me. For the month of July, for the Array Canal, net diversions 12,313, when they ended with 40,191 acre feet, excuse me. Percholateral, again, these are small amounts here, but still we keep track of those. Ended the season with 254 acre feet. Leesburg, 18,706. And at that point in July, we had diverted already 44,174 acre feet. California Extension, at that point here, 83 acre feet. Year to date, 323. East side, 12,083. Of course, this takes into consideration what we diverted to Texas, which is the Three Saints East, 371 to Texas for that month. So our net charge was 12,083. Going along the west side to New Mexico, 23,062. We delivered to 9,628 acre feet to Texas. Or this is actually not we didn't deliver it, but this is also including La Union East irrigation there. That's water that runs through our west side, charged to Texas. So again, the net 50,000 here. I'm sorry, jumping around here. And the east side to date, 26,000, to date 50,000. So that was the recap for July. Moving over to August, again, no diversions for the array. They finished actually at the end of July. So these are their final numbers here. Leesburg did have 8,390. They ended the season at 52,565. California Extension that I did not have any irrigations at that point in August. So they ended with 323. East side net 6,383 with 411 going to Three States East, leaving the total diversion for EBID at 33,148 for the season. The Del Rio lateral as well, we had 139 acre feet. The Del Rio ending with this balance of 1734. The west side, net 14,168, 9706 going to Texas. So ending the season with 64,330. Pump from the river, these are the river pumps. And any other lift pumps that we may have in our system that we do charge for. So this is that was the final number as well from water coming out of Wasteway 18 with a couple of straggling lift pumps that we do keep track of. So again, we ended the season with 2716. This number here was just a number that we calculated based off of our averages, which is 55% delivery, and what it would take for 14 to deliver 14 inches. So this is where we ended up. So we did pretty good as far as hitting our targets. In there, we also delivered 2 successful flat rate irrigations, and those were early on in June and July. With that, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Narvaez. Any questions for Mr. Narvaez? Solid.
Someone put off extension on there,
No,
or is he waiting for the
yeah, nothing from the extension yet.
And also, what's flood water, how is it going up? Rain over the plants.
Right now, the water that's supposed to be going on the east side is for ordering on the 3 Saints. It's not. Not yet. We haven't done any flood water diversion yet. So they maybe they were flushing something, but they shouldn't have done any of that. So we'll double check. But no, that water that's this morning we diverted water for 3 Saints East. So that's what should be there. Unless somebody opened the port.
Someone did, it was blowing in there, it's filling up.
We'll go check it out. But yeah, so and then just to give you a quick report, I mean, obviously the storm looks great coming through here. We started watching it this morning, the last couple of days. It's already going through the system right now. We did get a blip. It's some arroyos came below the Hainer Bridge. They're already on the way down. It looks like it might have peaked at 300. They're already dropping, so we're not going to probably use that in the Leesburg. It's just not going to happen. By the time we move it in, it'll be gone. So we may have an opportunity to pick that water up down here in Mesilla when it gets here. But we are expecting about another 400 CFS from the northern arroyos. So another system just kind of moved through as well. So we might be able to capture some of that in Leesburg. But ultimately, the best opportunity is probably going to be down in Mesilla at this point. I'll let you know. So,
Any way that we can help out.
yes.
James, you're supposed to say thank you from the northern people.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you for your arroyos. Keep saving my way.
I know you don't have a dam to hold it, just bring it down, let it in.
You can't use it, but you're welcome.
Just don't charge me.
Any other questions for Mr. Narvaez? Thank you, and I will have one piece of follow-up. There was a question about recharge from the system. Dr. King stated about 10% of the relief from the bio becomes recharged in the river. The bulk of the recharge comes from the system built out by the farmer. So approximately half of the water that is converted at our point of diversion becomes recharged. And then once it's delivered to the farm, somewhere between 25 and 50% of that becomes recharged.
Correct.
So there's a substantial amount of recharge within the system. More than half the water we convert becomes recharged.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. King.
another way to frame it is the river and the irrigation system are certainly 95%, if not more, percent of the total recharge. It just isn't myself.
That's a better answer.
I would add to that, Mr. Chairman, just on the limited research that I've done, just out of ancillary interest, a very, very similar circumstance in terms of percentages set for each state.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. We play our part in recharging the power.
Yeah, we do.
We use it and we recharge. With that, got a retirement, but I don't see.
Yeah, Mr. Felix, had to unfortunately attend some, appointments today. So we didn't get a chance to present to him, so hopefully we could get him to come in and be recognized by the board. If not, Mr. Felix did stick with us this irrigation season. Which is a tremendous benefit to get someone to train with all his experience to help out a new guy that will be taking over the unit. So hopefully he left us with some good knowledge and they pick it up, but I think that we'll be okay there. But yeah, it's gonna be a tremendous loss in that aspects because his experience was a lot by far. He used to run the Unit 4B area as well. And he had a second stint. He left the district but came back again and stepped in here in the central area. So we're gonna miss him, but he did give us knowledge, which we don't normally get that opportunity. So hopefully we can recognize him on the next board meeting. See what we can do there. Just couldn't attend today.
I would like that very much. Particularly, we can schedule it near lunch. Invite him to join us for lunch.
Yes.
Greatly appreciate him postponing his retirement to help bring people to the fund.
Yes, big time.
Any other comments about Mr. Felix before we move on? Please invite him, not force him to come. We would appreciate the opportunity to thank him.
Yes.
For his service. That brings us to a general administrative fire.
Hello. Vision issues as well. By plus minus. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Good morning. After all that fun water talk here, we're gonna get some financial numbers. I'm gonna start with your cash balances with a very wrong year. Today in the bank, we had 508,000 and we had 4.6 million with our investments with the state investment pool. I say our actual balances, that's because those are the ones that we've written checks for or we're waiting to clear the bank. And those were 191,000. And if you look at that, the difference is right now is pretty good compared to last year. We've had good cash flow. Some of that is because we've had some extra earnings. Some of it is because we had a lot of extra investment income. So on a cash perspective, we're doing fine. Let's see, so to go to the balance sheet, and now I gotta go back and share. Okay, I'm afraid I have your July financials here. I'm still working on your August financials. July was a good month. We received some of the money that we had been approved for the land use and right-of-way permits. Not many changes in the assets. There are some changes down here in the liabilities because we had a payroll at the very end of the month. And we had recorded it, but we hadn't paid it yet. So you'll see wages payable on there. Other than that, the balance sheets are pretty much as they were the month before, and I can stand for questions on the balance sheet and the cash if you would like.
Questions from the board? Franklin?
Yeah, I have some questions and, it's a few here in the comments.
Balance sheet
What
or
is
cash?
the allowance for doubtful accounts? What's included in that? On the
That-
balance?
That is pretty much been a static number for the ones that we write off or where we suspend the flat rate amounts. It is a little questionable. That was come up with by the auditors a couple of years ago about whether that's totally accurate or not, but that's where it came from.
Another thing that we might wanna look to do is add a net of accumulated depreciation and then consolidate those accumulated depreciations as well. I
Yes,
don't know why those are broken out, but what is the tip right there, construction in progress? What's included in that number?
the construction in progress includes mostly our grant projects that we are in the middle of. So they haven't been closed assets. There's a few other projects that we have that we were in the middle of, or that we still have expenses that are slowly trickling in, and those would only be for projects that would be over $5,000 in total.
Okay. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin. Thank you, Tyler.
Okay, and then finally, we have our profit and loss statement. Which is very. So again, I apologize for the being July's. I have kind of gotten a feel for August, and they're looking nothing to be alarmed about. So we have your revenues. A lot of this miscellaneous income continues to be from some of our large fees being paid by credit card. And we do charge a 3% fee, and we put that in the miscellaneous income. For the payroll expense, there was not a budget breakdown between payroll expense and fringe benefits. So those two go together. And for the monthly, when I divided it up, I underestimated how much budget would be for the month of July. Probably should put it at 750,000 for the number of payrolls, but for the year, we're still looking fine. The heavy equipment expense, this time there is fuel expenses included in everyone's breakdown here, but I have moved some of the items that were budgeted over to a capital expense so that they can begin depreciating. So that is a little bit of the difference here in the year to date. I intend to change that in the coming fiscal year so that we can see much better the difference between what was budgeted for capital versus what was purchased for capital. For the Bureau of Reclamation, we're still reflecting the benefit that we got from them postponing or changing their project. And they had charged us, and then we're giving us credit for it. So we have really been benefiting from that this year. Consulting should include contract expenses, I think. And again, it's probably just a timing for the allocation of the budget. The other thing would be office expense, and that's because we had some purchases of computers and toner, things like that go into there, and that's why we're over budget on that one. As you can see, our interest income, like I mentioned before, is considerably higher than what we were expecting it to be. However, our interest income on our receivables, because we have been getting receipts on those receivables, is lower than expected. And that brings us to that we are still at a net income compared to budget for the year to date.
Questions on our profit and loss statement? Cecily?
So I have a question on the grant proceeds. And I don't have all the details of the grants, but are those reimbursement always, or do we ever get like a lump sum that comes in and then we spend it down?
I don't know about the past, but our current grants are all reimbursement grants. And we did have some issues about grant timing come up with the middle grant. But since those have been resolved, I've taken up starting to work on our grant reimbursement requests again.
So a follow-up question. So I'm assuming that those grants have timelines in which they need to be expended. Is that correct?
That is correct. The drought resiliency one is, the timeline is as of 12/31/23 right now. I understand there is a extension request that has been contemplated. The Wind Cottrell grant, the final expenditures timeline has been reached, but the request for reimbursement for those expenditures has not expired yet. And the river drain instrument, that is actually the California Extension Grant, and we've got at least through December 2024 before we need to see if we're gonna run into any time.
So those numbers change significantly as the money comes in after requesting.
Yes.
Some of those will be the end of this year.
Well, like the Cacho Wind Grant, yeah, it will be, it'll basically fall off the financial statements for the next year because it's already a finished grant. The other two will continue, and we actually have another grant that is not on here yet that will show up.
Thank you, Ms. Hesperman. Thank you, Ms. Byron. Other questions? Hearing none. Move on to our next item of business.
Do you have the resolution, so,
Doesn't actually matter.
That's true. So yes, I would like to
resolution I
defer to
had
you then.
President Mann.
Solve that.
All right, so the issue before you today is that there was a transaction approved by the board in our formal process that followed our procedure multiple years ago. It then, for reasons that are both privileged and reasons that are unrelated to us, was put on hold. That now has been revived. Board member Lyles and yourself, Mr. President, and I met with the purchasers earlier this year. They have now put together the funding. We have put together all of the contract documents, deeds, everything that we need to actually effectuate the sale. But this one is of a value that is significant enough that it has to be approved by not just DFA, but the State Board of Finance. So that invokes a new, little bit additional procedure. Now Karen created the resolution based on what she was aware of that was needed, but we actually have a form resolution to use. And so what I would like to do is swap the resolution for the correct one that we used instead of the one that Karen put before you, because hers is close, but it's not what we've traditionally used when we submit to State Board of Finance. I'd like to stay consistent.
Thank you. So to be sure I understand, we have in our board packet, contracted sale, appraisal, survey, and then finally a resolution.
You're not
So-
approving the sale. You've already done that. You're approving the resolution to send it to Board of Finance.
The only part of this we're approving is the resolution.
Right. The documents for the sale are included for your benefit so that you know what that looks like. But
How would you like to present that resolution today? Would you like to simply read it into the record?
I don't have. I could probably do that on the fly, but it would be better, Mr. President, to table this for now and give me a little bit of time.
So would you like to table it and come back today, or are you asking us to
Yes.
postpone this for another meeting?
Table it for today, give me the lunch hour to actually make sure I'm not reading in wrong names. I'm looking at the form resolution I last used for the last one of this type. I would not want to misstep and read the wrong name in. So all I'm asking is for a little bit of time to actually fix the one that Karen has put for you, because there are some just minor changes that probably only matter to a lawyer and the Board of Finance, but that's important.
Thank you. And so to summarize, for the public, as the board of directors, we have an approved sale that is in compliance with the, can't remember the name of the policy, but our policy that governs sales of our property. We have a resolution that we need to prepare today. The resolution that is in your board packet is not the resolution that we'll be using because of the size of the transaction. We will be discussing it at lunch in open session. That said, are there any members of the public that came today to comment on that resolution? Seeing none, we will plan to act on that after lunch. I will accept a motion to table it until that time. I have a motion by Mr. Steve Wiles and a second by Mr. Gillis to table the approval of resolution 2023-07 until later in our meeting today. As a non-debatable motion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Through the chair, the ayes have it, and that item is tabled until later today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Byron. So that brings us to our next item, which is manager recruitment. And we have printed book.
Manager Greg Devier,
Yes.
I move to table item 12 on our meeting today until our December meeting,
So that's a motion to postpone.
until December.
And so, Samantha, I'm gonna put you on the spot here for a second, just as a point of order. Motions to postpone are non-debatable. I have a motion to postpone, item 12, manager recruitment until our December board meeting. Is there a second?
Yes.
I have a second from Mr. Solopek. That is a non-debatable motion. All those in favor of postponing item 12 until December board meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? President votes no. Committee to the chair, the ayes have it. The motion carries. That item is postponed until December.
Point of order, Mr. President, you don't actually vote in that instance.
I'll state my decision.
There you go.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to the manager's update. Mr. Essling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and President. First thing on my agenda is, it's my pleasure to, introduce to the board, the latest, member of the EBID leadership team, Hayden Randall, our new director of engineering. Grew up on a farm in New Mexico. Graduated from New Mexico State University and pursued a degree degree in agriculture and water resource engineering. While attending New Mexico State University, he took increasingly complex tasks underway and including an accreditation program and a strategic plan for the Academy of Civil, Agriculture, and Geological Engineers. Please welcome Hayden. You have a few words.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Board President, Davier, members of the board, thank you so much for having me here today. As Mr. Esplinger said, I grew up in agriculture. I actually grew up in Taos, New Mexico, not Raton. But growing up in Taos, my family has had a small cow-calf operation for my entire life and before I was born. And so I grew up helping out with that, showed animals in 4-H, traveled all over the state, became familiar with New Mexico State and Las Cruces, the 4-H program. So it was a natural choice to come down here for school in 2016, and I've loved Las Cruces and haven't left. In my time here, as Mr. Esplinger said, I earned my bachelor's in civil engineering with a focus on water resources engineering, a minor in agricultural engineering, and then went on to pursue my master's in also civil engineering with a focus in water resources and a minor in applied statistics. While I was working on my master's, I started working full-time as a consulting engineer here at a regional firm in town that has done some work with the district. And I didn't work on those projects, but I was working on water resources team there, dealing with mostly drinking water and wastewater projects, focused on rural utilities or EBIDs and the similar. Yeah, are there any questions?
I just have one. Can you roll outside of an arena?
Yes.
And then Dave will find out.
All right. Pass Dr. Fox's first test.
Yeah.
Any questions for Anderson, is that correct?
Hayden Randall.
Hayden Randall.
Yes, sir.
You will find I am horrid getting names right, so I'm gonna keep saying it for a while until I get it right.
Already worse than bosses.
Right. Randall, welcome. Are there questions for Mr. Randall? On behalf of the board, let me welcome you to Elton Butte Irrigation District. We appreciate your willingness to serve here at the district. I hope that your time here is prosperous for both the district and yourself. Yes, sir.
Greg, I got a comment. This young man and a couple others worked on a drip system with us several years ago where I made him, he was a college student, maybe
Yes.
doing some grant work or something with Dr. Keaton, I believe. And I got to meet him and two of his other colleagues and enjoyed working with him very much. I really did. Welcome.
That was his capstone design project.
Well, he was through, you know, a lot of these kids from university, thought just not that good to work with. Him and his crew.
You don't have to reply to that. He also ran water on Greg's farm.
I did. Yes.
I have been remiss. Jennifer, I meant to recognize you after our water resources leading to you being here today. I did not have you on the agenda, but I am always appreciative of your attendance. Is there anything that you would like to follow up from our meeting today?
I appreciate that, Mr. President. I know I'm not on the agenda, but I did want to come down as a show of support from the Bureau of Reclamation. There's a lot going on in the basin. Reclamation this year, the full partner to the district, our districts. We want to work with the state to bring solutions. My sense in the room here today is people are anxious to move past all the controversy, and we're looking for solutions. And that's exactly what I wanted to come down today. And I really appreciate that sentiment. Drilling each other, we're not fighting, we're being very solutions oriented. I think there is one more thing here that you guys might be missing, which is 10 years of fighting in the Supreme Court. He has brought the federal government willingness to leverage resources, unprecedented funding levels that we have available today. And we're committed to bringing those to this basin, working towards the solution. It's water supply issues, conservation, the other things we've been talking about, infrastructure improvements, all that habitat to the list there, and working with NGO organizations, just a comprehensive package to move forward away from the controversy towards a brighter future. I appreciate the optimism on the 2017 we had a two-foot allocation. So thank you very much. I wanted to just express our support. We're optimistic. We did put in a funding request. We received a lot of letters from around the Rio Grande Basin. Rio Grande is eligible for Inflation Reduction funding. And we compiled all the letters we got and put our own requests in a spreadsheet that went to the region that is in DC right now being considered. And we remain optimistic. We have contracts in the system, expect they get awarded, and we're gonna need money to put on those contracts. So I've staffed up, we provided funding to the state so that they can add resources to get people to help deliver and implement large complex projects. So nothing but optimism and commitment to help out and do what we can.
Thank you very much for attending today. We always welcome the Bureau to come to our meetings. We appreciate the cooperative nature of our land. It takes many cooperating entities, state, federal government, through the Bureau, our local farmers, working together as a community to solve these big complex problems. Thank you very much.
So you're saying our problem has been fighting Idaho Supreme Court for decades. We should have been in federal court to get federal funding.
Be careful what you wish for.
Hasn't been fun.
We don't know how to solve your problem. We can just show you where we slammed our own hands. That brings us back to Mr. Esling.
Thank you. I just have two further announcements to make on upcoming conferences. They weren't on the October calendar, but we have a huge conference that we always attend called the NWRA annual conference. This year is in San Antonio, so it's pretty close to home. And certainly we need to make sure we are well attended to that one since it's so close to home. And so that one is November 8th through the 10th. And please start thinking about maybe attending that, and certainly let Naomi know if you want to go. That one's always a good one to go to. It's also an opportunity to spend 15 minutes with the commissioner, and we want to make sure we have our list of things to talk about. So that was a very important conference. The other one is a Water Leaders Workshop. That one is going to be held by the state of New Mexico, and that's on December 6th to 8th in the Convention Center. And certainly that was another one that called Water Leaders. So put that one on your calendar as well, and then we'll, as we get closer to these dates, we'll be reminding you of the importance of attendance to those that are real close to home. And with that, thank you.
Thank you very much. With regard to the Water Leaders Workshop, I know that they also were planning to spend some time up at Elephant Butte in the TRC area. Everybody know if that's still the state's plan? Thank you very much. And you missed the inaugural Rio Grande Water Users Conference.
Well, I mentioned that at the beginning of the calendar. That's very important. That's coming up on October 30th. I mentioned that.
We do have approvals for sending people to that one. We don't have for NWRA yet, and I think to need to register, we need to get at least a head count.
That's a good idea, Mrs. Saltek. So, Mr. Esling, how many staff members do you think is appropriate to take the NWRA?
Not only myself goes this year, I privately with Joa, but on that Samantha goes. So there's usually 3 staff, and then there's 3 people.
Very good. So I understand 2 staff members and legal counsel. And so I will mention, I already have it blocked out on my calendar. It is my intention to attend NWRA again. The opportunity to meet Commissioner Reclamation is an important one to seize. It had made significant differences in our relationship with Bureau of Reclamation in the past, and the world is run by those who show up, showing that we're interested enough in these solutions to show up at these meetings to express our concern. Who else is available to attend that? I have one with Mr. James Saltek. I'd like to do that one. I have one with Mr. Joe Paul Lack. Thank you both. And Sal Nunez as well. So that brings us to 4 directors. So let's plan that if, whatever reason, one of the 4 of us can't attend, that hopefully one of the remainder of you will be willing to take our list. Those who want those. We understand that Ms. Frank Paul Saltek is already covered up by other people that did prior to us. So I will accept a motion to approve the registration and travel expenses for 4 board members, 2 staff members, and legal counsel. 3 staff members.
Oh, 2 and me.
Yep, that's right.
So-
2 staff members and legal counsel. Oh, legal, pardon. To attend the NWRA conference.
I move that.
I have a motion from Mr. Lack, seconded by Mr. Frank Paul Saltek to approve travel.
Whatever it was. What that was.
That.
Registration.
Used to be New James.
I so moved.
Sorry.
4 board members, 2 staff members, and the NWRA conference in San Antonio. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Due to the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. For the water leader conference, since it's here in Las Cruces, we need a head count for that. Well,
For what?
for the water leadership conference in Las Cruces in the summer.
Oh, I'll just call it a special board meeting like we do for hearings.
Very good.
Yeah.
And it looked like the agenda was still draft. Is there even a registration process for that yet?
It's not, the lady that's putting it together, I just toured with her last week and, we changed some of the things that she had on her, so that it fit the package. Give to people, they want us to give a part of the tour package, program, part of that program is a tour, and they want us to do a tour about it, so, we're working, but the agenda to be, modified.
Mr. President, my understanding is that the state engineer's office and ISC are putting this on and wanted us to be a collaborating partner in helping show some of our projects and ideas. We've been focused on Jennifer and her team, and bringing ISC along with us. And now this would be more focused on state. You'll recall that every time we try to do something to update the state, they plop a meeting for themselves on top of what we have planned, and it doesn't work out. This is dedicated to them hearing what we've been doing for the last year. They have supposedly been cooperating to revise the agenda, make sure it does flow correctly. But my understanding from the state engineer himself is that this would necessarily include EBID in a large way. And that Gary would be given some pretty decent flexibility in how and what he wanted to show, as long as it worked with the tour format and their agenda for conference, sessions. I don't think they are at a point where registration is open, because I think they're not necessarily intending this to be open to the public. Is that right? That's right. So we will be registering as a coordinator, cooperator, sort of like a tour guide, like this summer when we put on our own tour. It won't necessarily be a register for an open conference.
So this will be more of an invitation event.
Right.
Opposed to register.
Yes,
Very
that's
good.
my understanding.
I have it blocked out on my calendar. Should I receive an invitation? If I don't, I'll
And, here also, they asked me to ask Bureau if they could have some kind of, speaker in front of the dam where the group would talk about the dam and the project, so. And
We love talking about our projects.
Great. I know you would. So I gave her your name.
Oh, okay.
So my request of my fellow board members is to note that time, December 6th through 8th, so that should you receive an invitation that you are prepared to attend that and listen and participate in discussions about policy of water in our area. You are water leaders in our area. One item on NWRA, I will note the NWRA conference falls on our normal board meeting date in November. So we will need to move that date. Are there opinions on whether we should move it forward or back one? Mr. Franzoy.
I'll say move it back for the.
There's an opinion.
And the reason for that is that we'll be closing out, our finalized budget at the end of October, submitting that. So we'll wanna,
Given that moving forward moves it to November 1st, that's awfully close to the end of October. Ms. Solbeck.
I think I agree with Joa that we need to move it back to the 15th, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Not the 1st, because if we have our regular board meeting, then a week later, I'm working on another agenda for another board meeting. That's too soon.
Yeah.
And then we wouldn't have the opportunity to update the board after NWRA until December. So in December is a crazy meeting because we will be canvassing. So we often condense our agenda so that we don't do big things other than canvas. So I would suggest that we move it to the 15th.
So given that advice, what is the will of the board?
No, because they approved the travel, and so we can do that.
Thank you for that clarification. What is the will of the board regarding the November meeting? I have a motion from Mr. Frank Balsall to move the meeting to the 15th of November. Second from Mrs. Tracy. Second, Mrs. Tracy Etlinger. Any discussion?
That's your.
Any additional discussion?
Well, Mile comes in December, no, just kidding.
Sorry. Hearing no additional discussion, all discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any the chair, the ayes have it. The motion carries. Our November board meeting is moved to November 15th. Any other items, Mr. Thank you. That brings us to our engineering and maintenance with project update first.
Project updates are limited. We're coming out of irrigation season, as we've already discussed. So maintenance and projects will be breaking them down.
Thank you. I like brief updates. Thank you very much. So that brings us to special use permit.
Yes, sir. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me set up here. Okay, for August into September, we have 19 licenses that I'm gonna go over here. It's kind of a variety. So I'll go through each one here. You guys have any questions, please let me know. I'll go well as Hayden and Juan, go ahead and chime in if you need to. I'd appreciate it. Starting off with engineering job number 032. This is the Village of Hatch. They're looking to construct, operate, and maintain a new sewer line crossing the Colorado Drain.
If I could ask you, if you
Sure.
do the permit number, that's the number we have.
Okay, yeah, no, it's not a problem. So we got license number 017. Sure. And like I mentioned, Village of Hatch, they're looking to install a new sewer line crossing the Colorado Drain. We did add some special conditions in here, being that it is a sewer drain crossing. Buried crossings must be constructed no less than 6 feet below the invert of the Mariano Trujillo Street culvert throughout the EBID right of way. No construction allowed during irrigation season. Existing 3-inch force main and casing is to be removed from EBID right of way, and license and or its agent are to coordinate with EBID prior to the start of construction for the general conditions.
Just a point of clarification, the copy of the license I have says it's no less than 5 feet, instead of 6.
It's,
5.
I must have read it, it's no less than 5 feet.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, I believe that, Mr. Holguin is on line. He works with Wilson and Company, and is representing the village of Hatch.
Thank you very much. I'm going to let staff complete their presentation, and then I'll recognize Mr. Holguin to add any additional information.
So the next 6 in line here are gonna be El Paso Electric, and they are maintaining the renewals, and they're maintaining existing aerial electrical lines. Get the photos here. Okay, so it's El Paso Electric, license number 223. And like I mentioned, aerial electrical line crossing the Mayfield lateral. And there was 6 in line here, so that is license numbers 321 through 326, and they are all aerial electrical line crossings.
And all renewals?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Would you like me to go through each one with the license number, or does that matter?
Is there a request
Is there?
to go through those individually? Hearing none, the presentation was complete.
Good. Okay, the next one in line here is license number 229. This is Comcast Cable. They're looking to construct, operate, maintain a buried fiber optic line crossing the Houghton lateral. License number 230, and this is a licensee is the City of Las Cruces Public Works. They're to operate, looking to operate and maintain existing road paralleling the Mesilla Drain. And this is actually the roadway, if you're familiar with Las Cruces, it's along leading to Burns Lake.
Would you show the aerial of that, please?
Sure. It's this section right here, leading to Burns Lake.
So I don't quite understand the roadway there. Is it on a single bank? Is that height? I don't know what's going on with our facility there.
No, it's a roadway that probably will end up eventually a street, but it's got a permit on our life.
Yeah.
Because it leads to Bird Lake.
And is it a roadway that's on a drain bank?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is it on both sides of the drain or is
The
it
east bank.
east side of the bank? Thank you.
And that one also, that's a renewal as well. Okay, next license, 231, Olga and Joe Acosta. They look to construct, operate, and maintain one harvest gate on the east bank of the Chamberino East Lateral. Next license is license number 232, Pantera Networks. This is to construct, operate, and maintain a buried fiber optic line crossing the Mesilla Drain. License number 233, Doniana Flood Commission. They're looking to reconstruct, operate, and maintain a stormwater structure discharging from the Beta Pond to the Dunyan Dam's outfall channel to the Leesburg Canal, Wasteway 5.
We have additional questions on that call.
Sure. Next license is gonna be license number 234. This is Mr. Keith Deputy Farms. He's looking to construct, operate, maintain 4 harvest gates located on the east and west banks of the upper Chamberino lateral. Got a aerial here. So we're looking at east and west banks along Lister. And then on Essendon. These 2 areas, the west, or east and west banks. Okay, license number 235, Jasper Riddle Noisy Water Winery. This is to relocate, construct, I guess, and relocate, operate and maintain a river lift pump station on the Rio Grande from a station 1697 to about 22 William.
Not that one as well.
Okay. Next license is 236, Jose Salinas, to operate and maintain an existing vehicle culvert crossing, the Chamberino East Lateral. Yes, that is a renewal. Okay, license number 237, Anthony Water Sanitation District. This is to construct, operate, and maintain a buried 6-inch water line crossing the east drain. License number 238, Leroy Garcia, Blanca Sotelo. Constructing, operating, maintain 2 harvest gates on the east and west banks of the Anthony Lateral. Okay, I believe these are the last 2 here. This is license number 239, Comcast Cable. This is construct, operate, maintain aerial fiber optic line crossing the Picacho Main Canal. And another, license number 240, this is Comcast Cable again. Construct, operate, maintain an aerial fiber optic line crossing the Leesburg Drain. And that'll complete our 19 licenses.
Thank you very much. So we'll go back to license 2023 L017, the Village of Hatch.
Okay.
Mr. Holguin, did you have anything to add?
No, sir. This is Alfredo Holguin. I don't think I had anything else to add. We've been coordinating with Juan and more recently with Hayden on the requirements for that. So this hit just, I guess the only thing to mention this, we did submit this to the board earlier this year. And then we modified the design to meet your requirements. And then that was this resubmission, and then just now with the special conditions.
Thank you very much. And that was going to be my only note, is that this is familiar. We appreciate rectifying our concerns and redesigning this so that it complied with our policy. Specifically, that the sewer line could not be above the invert of the drain. Any questions for Mr. Holguin or questions regarding that permit, that license? Thank you. I had a question on 2023 L233 Doñana County Flood Commission.
Yeah, let me just locate them.
So anytime we have stormwater licenses, I want to be sure I understand it well, because there are stormwater discharges into our system that this board has expressed their opposition to. If I understand this correctly, this is part of an outfall channel from one of the flood control dams in our district. This is not municipal stormwater that has come off the city streets. Is that accurate?
I'd say yes. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but that looks like.
How's the stormwater discharge currently being handled?
I'd have to ask that question, of Hayden or Juan. Juan,
Mr. Esplinger.
We'll go to Mr. Esling.
Mr. Chair, there's actually two dams, so Donniana North and Donniana South, that come together into a pond. They call it the Beta Pond. And they're doing some improvements to that pond to collect that stormwater that comes off of those two dams. Then it goes over a weir and goes down the outfall channel that can either go to Leesburg, Wasteway 5 and out to the river, or it can be diverted into one of our drains. And so the existing permit is to just reconstruct the pond where that red circle is.
Yes.
The rest of the existing system is well in place and works very well. They just want to make the pond bigger.
Understood, thank you. So it's not a change in the stormwater discharge into our system in any way. It is a rehab of the pond itself. What portion of EBID's property is within that pond area?
None.
It's an easement.
It's an easement.
Okay.
It's a flood flowage easement for the flood control off of those two discharges from the dam.
And the reason for them being required to have a license for this is?
Because we have interest through the easement.
Thank you very much. Any other questions regarding license 2023 L233? Hearing none, I had a question on license 2023 L235, which is the original pump. So I understand our interest in this. We're effectively a private point of diversion for an Elton Butte Irrigation District water right. That point of diversion is moving. I have not seen one of these before. Have we done this in the past? We're discussing the river pump permit. I'll restate my question.
Noisy water.
This is effectively, there is a private point of diversion for an Elton Butte Irrigation District water right, and they're requesting to move that point of diversion. I understand our interest. Have we considered these requests in the past?
My understanding is yes, in the form of settlement agreements and litigation, which is why we are trying to consider them in other formats now.
One other thing, Sam, if you'll look at that same spot years ago, when I was working for Brady Porter, when the flume up there at the flume farm got so compromised, the water wouldn't get down there. They actually have a pump right there on our place that went right into, it was temporary, but they pumped out of the river, Greg, and supplied water to that whole Hainer deal, because lettuce in those days was real hard. You couldn't leave, you had to irrigate it on good water. Number one, number two, it had to be watered real frequently. And there was not enough water because the flume up there was leaking underneath, where it goes under the river so bad that they couldn't get enough water down there to supply them. So they did, it was a temporary pump, but she said, have they done that in the past? There's an example where they did pull out of the river for a while, and it was just till they got the flume there.
We've had specific, though, battles with individuals and even with the state engineer's office over who has the authority and jurisdiction to permit these types of issues, and it is us.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the board of directors regarding this license? Mr. Esslinger.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. The clarification here is that the existing location is not suited to the farmer's irrigation system and his operation. So that particular river pump is also in disrepair. So he's looking to just move it upstream to this location, or
Downstream.
Downstream.
Yes, sir.
So that he can then match with his irrigation and his flood operation of his vineyard to a more suitable location. And so it will be a new pump with required RTU.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board of directors? Because this is an uncommon license, are there any members of the public that are here that are here because of this license that wish to give input? Mr. Hernandez?
Question was whether or not this has ever come up. Yes, it has come up before when I was counsel to the district. But the dispute was with IBWC. It was IBWC that said they had jurisdiction, which everybody can have jurisdiction. So Samantha's correct. Ultimately, they resolved the issue with IBWC and we did as well. It's not every instance that IBWC would be involved. It's just the one time it did come before the board, maybe 30 years ago, it did involve IBWC.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. That additional information, Mr. Hernandez. So to our hydrology experts, it is my assumption that the least impactful move of a point of diversion is in the downstream direction. The downstream movements are less impactful than upstream movements in general. Am I misunderstanding that?
I would tend to agree with that. Generally speaking, I would offer, though, in this instance, the move is small, if you will, in terms of the relocation. So I would not anticipate that there would be much of a difference.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that input.
Yeah, there are situations where a move downstream, if it's a long distance, it can have a major impact because what you're basically doing is leaving the in-stream flow in stream for longer. And so there have been some, fish habitat projects and things like that where they move diversions downstream, specifically leave water in stream longer. But with this one,
is there any desire from any board member to act on this license separately? Hearing none, are there any other questions regarding any license presented before us today? The president will accept a motion to approve the license list presented. I have a motion from Mr. Frank Paul Solopek, seconded by Mr. Sam Calhoun to approve the licenses as presented. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing the president, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. The licenses are approved.
Thank you.
Bring this to our legal update.
Part of it.
Our open session legal update.
All right, what am I doing? Legislative update. Okay, so, on the federal level, the farm bill is delayed. It is not going to be released until there is a CR or some sort of stopgap to stop government from shutting down. Will expire on, September 30th. And so Congress, probably rightly so, has prioritized keeping government open over finalizing the farm bill for this year. But again, both expire at the 30th of September. We are expecting a continuing resolution, but the fight is over the level of funding under Inflation Reduction Act. Republicans want that money back. And so they are now in control of the House and not willing to necessarily negotiate on certain issues, but of course, then the Senate comes in and forces the negotiation because they're controlled by the Democrats and still want that level of funding out there or more. So big fight is over the IRA funding. But we won't see anything on Farm Bill anymore, I don't think, in the near future. On the state side of things, really fast before we move on to what our lobbyists are doing. There is a coalition that has already formed as of, I believe it was June of this year is the first time I saw them. You'll recall in this past legislative session, there was a bill introduced to make leave under the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, paid. That failed this past legislative session. They thought due to lack of time and lack of coordination initially. There is already a coalition lobbying throughout New Mexico in meetings and has a draft bill ready to go, ready to be dropped with the support of the governor to require paid FMLA. It does not, however, include any provisions currently that would amend the FMLA period. So potentially an employee could be out for 180 days of paid leave, and the employer could do nothing about it but pay the paycheck. That's what the current proposal is. Obviously, the legislative session will work through those issues. But again, I think Republicans are outnumbered 70% to 30% in our legislative body. So not having high hopes for Republicans walking back much of that proposal if it does actually get dropped in the form that we see is out there. So again, typically we don't take positions on employment law matters at EBID. We just watch those issues as they move through the legislature, but that would be something you would need to plan for in a budget sort of setting if that were to pass, because we do have employees regularly who are out on FMLA. There are not currently in this draft exemptions. Of course, ag groups are saying, wait a second, what about exemptions for farms, things like that? But they're not exemptions. This would be broadly applicable to pretty much any business, down to, I think it's 6 employees, who have 6 employees. So, pretty onerous, and we typically don't take positions on those sorts of things, but we probably will want to keep an eye on that one. NWRA and Family Farm Alliance have begun in earnest their strategic planning. Now that water seasons are sort of ending across the West, strategic planning happens in a couple of different settings within those entities, culminating with each of their annual conferences, NWRA in November and Family Farm in February. So we will need to start working internally, like Gary mentioned earlier, to nail down our priorities. We are working with the New Mexico group to nail down New Mexico priorities, and then we will be taking those. I already have a few meetings slated within NWRA. Family Farm has their monthly meeting is all we're working through right now. But within NWRA, we're also doing something a little bit different this year. We're polling our members. We are in the process of, in fact, I've got meetings on the contract later today. We're in the process of hiring a group called Corona Insights to poll NWRA members on structure of NWRA, how it sets its goals, whether it meets its goals, whether there's other ways of doing business that members would prefer. It won't be necessarily a referendum on, do we like the executive director or not? Do we like X contractor or not? It'll be more of the, are we in touch with our membership and what their priorities are and what they would like to see us doing on Capitol Hill? So those of you who have attended meetings in the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, will receive a link. But we are all members of NWRA on this board. So it's possible that the board will open it up broader to all membership. Currently, we are just opening it up to those who have attended conferences in the last 2 years. But it will be sort of a litmus test to figure out if NWRA is in line, both if its board is in line with its membership and if it's essentially its executive directors are in line with the board and its membership. This is something that has actually played out to be a very interesting situation within NWRA. I was the one that suggested the survey because we had to survey our membership a few years ago within the Hatch Valley, and that provided some data to us that really helped us decide what we were going to do in certain situations as far as early releases. There was some discussion about how we would do strategic planning within the entity, and frankly, being so new on the NWRA board, my suggestion was, why don't we ask our members? Because I would know what they're thinking, and the rest of everybody sort of thought that would be a good idea. I'm bringing this to your attention because Corona Insights, for a survey that is purely electronic, that will go out to as many people as we want within 2 iteration sessions of preparing the survey questions. So we provide topics, they provide proposed questions. We provide comments on that. They provide final 2 iterations. Survey goes out. They receive the results. They break it down by, they can break down the survey results by board member, attendee, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, however you want it broken down. We'll take some demographics in the beginning. They are charging us $8,000. Yeah. You might want to consider something like that to touch base with your constituency, because for $8,000, you can get a lot of information. So I bring that up because part of this year has been trying to figure out the other side of the looking glass. Farmers are upset at various different things, budget or litigation, whatever it may be. Take the temperature for $8,000. You almost can't say no to that, but it's not on your agenda today. So that is what we're doing within NWRA. And since it was my idea, I got tapped to make sure it happens, which is why I know about the process right now to suggest that rather than doing our own survey like we did in the past, this group is pretty impressive and not very costly at all. And then finally, on the Inflation Reduction Act spending, the Bureau of Reclamation, after listening to informal comments for approximately 9 months, went into a formal comment stage where they accepted formal written comments all across the West regarding what kind of spending and focus IRA should have. And of course, we saw the Colorado River come out in force and say, this money is meant for the Colorado River. But to other states' credit, our own state, Nevada, a lot of others came out and said, well, wait a second, what about that language in the bill that says, and other similarly situated drought-stricken basins? What does that mean then, Colorado River? And so a lot of the comments went the other direction and said, hey, we're in the same boat. Here's where you should be spending your money. We got a lot of comments in from the Lower Rio Grande that were very supportive of EBID projects. In fact, the Bureau of Reclamation, and I wish Jennifer hadn't left so soon, but she had to. The Bureau of Reclamation reached out and said, look, you guys' comments were great, and they were right in line with what we were hoping to see. They are the type of projects we're looking for, but oh, by the way, are you aware of how many other people filed comments in support of your infrastructure package? And Gary and I were aware of a couple of them because they reached out to us for actual language on how they could support us. But this is a direct result of the tours we put together earlier in the year. Now we have other groups, other irrigation districts, environmental interests, the state of New Mexico, Bureau of Reclamation, commenting on our behalf, supporting our request for this money, which really backs up the Colorado River a tremendous amount because they still believe all of that money should be theirs. So the Bureau, like Jennifer said, is working on moving into the actual funding cycle, and I'll cover more of how that's gonna roll out in closed session because that is privileged. That's my update, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Ms. Solvay. Any questions regarding legal and legislative updates? Hearing none, that brings us to the suspension and transfer hearing. Oh, well, I've got HR and safety, I'm sorry. So we have our HR and safety update that we've received in our packet.
Yes.
Mr. Esslinger, do you have any comments on that?
No, sir, we're climbing a little bit out of the hole. We have a employee count now of 71. We've been able to hire a mechanic and we've been able to hire an equipment operator. So we're moving towards trying to get at least our operation maintenance team up to speed. Certainly, we've hired our director of engineering, so we've completed filling all the holes. And we're still trying to work with all of the departments of how we can share and cross-train employees so that we can try to do more of our work with less by utilizing folks from other departments and in another department when the time is needed. So I'd say right now we're moving forward and it looks positive that we can finish the year with again, positiveness. It comes from people actually coming in and interviewing for jobs, which was tough in the beginning, but we have people coming in now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Esslinger. Is there any recognition to the board that you have prepared?
Yeah, we do have recognition. Annette AJ Carlson's been here with us 15 years. There she is, right there. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
We have years of service with Ray Reddy from down south. He's our maintenance mechanic and operator down there. He's been with us 26 years, planning on retiring here soon. Patrick Lopez has been with us 21 years. He's our SCADA systems director, and Juan Cabero in the back. He has been with us 2 years. Doing a great job in the engineering. That's
Thank you very much. And thank you, AJ, for 15 years of service to the
Thank
district.
you.
So that brings us to the suspension and transfer agreement. I call to order the board. Sitting as the board to hear suspension and transfer applications. The board is convened to act upon applications by landowners in the district to transfer water rights pertinent to lands within the district which are not suitable for irrigation or capable of being properly irrigated to other lands within the district. These applications are filed under section 73-13-4 of the New Mexico statutes. This board will decide if, within their judgment, the other lands within the district may be profitably and advantageously irrigated. The applicants are identified as listed on Exhibit A. The applicants were required to publish notice in any newspaper published within Doñana County of EBID taking action to consider a resolution allowing the transfer. The publication should have listed the time and place of this meeting, listed the action to be taken by this board, listed a description of the move to and move from lands, and listed the reason for the requested transfer. Does staff have a copy of the notice of publication?
Yes, sir, we do.
Were all the required points in the publication?
Yes, sir.
Was the last publication date made prior to this hearing?
Yes, sir, it was.
We will now proceed with the presentation by staff. After that, the board members can ask questions of staff.
Hello, everybody. We have one water transfer. It is 2023 WT 009. Floyd Rivera is transferring 0.50 water rights to Tatney Flores. If approved, Floyd Rivera will no longer have water rights, and Tatney's new total will be 8.05. And staff recommends approval.
At this point, are there any questions from the board on staff from the presentation? At this point in time, the board will take evidence and testimony from the applicant or their representatives or any persons who are here to protest the applications. We will proceed with any presentation by the applicants. After that, the board members and EBID staff can ask questions of the applicants. Would the applicants or their representative introduce themselves? Hearing none. Are there any protesters who wish to speak? If so, please identify yourselves for the record. Hearing none. Are there any other comments from staff or from the board? The chair will now entertain a motion to have a resolution to approve or disapprove the application.
Chairman Greg, I move that resolution 2023-S&P-09 be accepted.
Second. I have a motion for Mr. Joe Paul Lack and a second for Mr. Steve Lyles to approve resolution 2023 S&P-09. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it and the motion carries. I will ask that the resolution be formalized as called for by section 73-13-5 of the New Mexico statutes, and that the secretary of the board immediately certify and file with the state engineer a true copy of the resolution and action of the board. If there are any protestants who disagree with the action of the board, you may appeal this decision directly to the district court
as provided under section 73-13-4 of the New Mexico statutes. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn the board sitting to hear the applicants. Application. I have a motion from Mr. James Albeck, second Mr. Joe Paulak to adjourn as the board sitting to hear requests for transfer and suspension. Any discussion? No. That's not a debatable motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the chair, the ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Sitting as the board to hear suspension for applications.
Thank you.
With that, lunch is here.
I move, go to lunch.
I have a motion to recess. Seconded by Mr. Nunez. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are at recess. Dr. King, will you please, pause our sit? Stop the. Well, good. I see a pause button right there next to the screen.
Always a good day when it's great.
Right next to the screen share. So bring us out, this again, right.
You need me, bud?
I cut Bill
Thank you.
loose for the other guys and then you guys can.
You'll have a good trip.
We'll see you guys tonight.
We are back into open session. We had one tabled agenda item. It is the approval of resolution 2023-07, sale of real property with Buenos Suerte.
Mr. President, I think it would be easier if I just read it to you instead of trying to take the time to get it on the screens and different things. So,
Very good.
do not read along with the one in your board book. It is
Okay.
incorrect. This is titled a resolution approving sale of a portion of the Mesilla Drain Elephant Butte Irrigation District 2023-07. Whereas the Elephant Butte Irrigation District of Las Cruces, New Mexico, Doñana County of the state of New Mexico is a political subdivision of the state of New Mexico. And whereas EBID has approved policies in place to relinquish real property interests. And whereas Buenos Suerte Ventures LLC, a New Mexico limited liability company, formally requested to purchase a portion of the Mesilla Drain and follow the steps laid out in EBID's policy to do so. The plat of survey, and whereas the plat of survey dated October 12th, 2018 is attached here too and made a part hereof as Exhibit A, and the legal descriptions for the portion of the Mesilla Drain requested for relinquishment are attached here too and made a part hereof as Exhibit B. And whereas EBID and Buenos Suerte Ventures LLC agree that this portion of the Mesilla Drain is no longer necessary to serve the purposes of EBID, and whereas New Mexico State Board of Finance approval is required for disposal of such real property. Now therefore be it hereby resolved that on this 13th day of September 2023, EBID being in session in accordance with the Open Meetings Act and a quorum being present, does hereby approve the sale of portions of the Mesilla Drain as shown in the attached survey and legal descriptions. And then is your signature block. So,
Okay, so we don't get into pricing.
no,
for the project.
that's what I wanted to change.
Okay,
Because I cannot remember why I set this form up the way I did for Gail, but I did. And that's where I don't like to deviate unless I know why I'm deviating and what I was doing before. And Karen had a lot of stuff in here, about, where is it? About, the policy and the dollar figure and what's being, I didn't like this because it didn't look like our previous one. I'm not saying it was necessarily wrong. I just know what I did previously was with intention. I don't necessarily remember. It was a long time ago. It was like 2014 that I set up that resolution. So I prefer to use this format. If DFA and State Board of Finance come back and say they need something else, we will come back to you at that point in time. This one is a tough one anyway, because you'll notice we've got surveys and appraisals dated 2018. And so why is it 2023 and we're just now doing this? Well, in part because they didn't want to purchase it initially because of the cost. It was higher than they wanted to pay. We said, okay, well, it's there for the taking if you do want to pay that. The board stood on that. Then the board issued a moratorium. Then there was some question about whether there was or wasn't a moratorium. And in the meantime, all those projects were pulled from me by Patrick, and so I just never followed up. Then earlier this year, Steve and you met with me and said, no, let's finish this. So we're finally finishing it. but it could run into some problems with State Board of Finance just because of the age of the transactions. That's why I think approving it in this way with our previous standard form will actually give it better legs.
So as a reminder, it's about 3.5 acres. It's at our policy rate, $68,000, something like that.
3.678 acres, and it's a total of $68,282. It's at the 18,565 policy rate.
But, their survey came in, what, about 14.4, so we're considerably above their,
Yeah,
I mean, their
their appraisal.
appraisal.
Yeah, we're considerably,
Yeah, but
right.
we're way over. So we are getting more than the appraisal amount, so
That's
that ought to help the state.
5 times. Yeah, they're afraid.
Where's this at?
Messia Drain,
218.
North Valley.
Right, they're north of, thank you. Also, Mr. Chair, we have one more of those that's in the works right now, also it's up in Hatch. And hopefully we'll be bringing that one to you, that one's on Scotty Adams and Stormy Adams farm.
Yeah, and poor Scotty, you know, he's asked me for years, can you just get it done? And the answer was yes, and then it was no, and then it was yes, and then it was no, and I haven't even called him because I'm like, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm working on a document for you. So I hope the answer is yes. But that one was one that was approved almost simultaneous with this one,
Right.
and then just dumped the tracks and off we went, and now we're trying to pull that back together. Those two did make a lot of sense as far as relinquishments. Now, the portion of the request that Scotty made that didn't make sense, we already dealt with and denied it, and it's not before you, it won't be back before you, but those were two that will bring in money and reduce maintenance, so those are kind of our goals.
Carrie? That was it.
Okay. Do you entertain a motion?
Yes, to pass the
Yes.
resolution that I read to you.
I move to approve resolution 2023-07 to sell property to Venezuela.
I have a motion by Mr. Joe Polak, seconded by Mr. Frank Paul Solve to approve resolution 2023-07. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Madam President, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. That is the completion of our open session agenda. I will entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss the agenda. Motion by Mr. Frank Paul Solve, seconded by Mr. Salmon, to go into closed session. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in closed session.